Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Linda was walking down the corridor of the ward for the seriously ill. Clutching a bulky bale with clean linen in her hands, the head nurse looked at her, mentally rejoicing that she had such an efficient nurse under her command. Of course, outwardly Mrs. Rose did not show her satisfaction and tried to keep her subordinates under strict control. "Willis, why are you walking like a snail? It's no time to be idle. We'll have to carry the laundry anyway. And Scholl's ultrasound needs to be taken. And you're still in the clouds," she said. Linda turned round and met the head nurse's eyes and nodded slightly. She didn't feel like arguing. What was the use of arguing when Mrs. Rose had disliked her at first sight? It was because the head of the ward, Mr. Sven, had seen in the new girl the potential of a future nurse. But she had to study for that. And Rose couldn't let that happen. She dismissed potential rivals straight away. Not personally, of course, but with the help of connections, which stretched invisible threads in the office of the head doctor himself. Of course, Rose realized that by firing Linda, she risked losing an executive and disciplined employee. On the other hand, the end justified the means, because Linda was too strange. She carried a notebook with her everywhere, in which she made sketches with a simple pencil every free minute. Rose was, frankly speaking, annoyed by this behavior of her subordinate. "Willis, what are you doing here? You're not a free artist after all. And the ward is the least likely place for your art," Rose said. Linda blushed to the roots of her hair. "I'm sorry, but I'm not selling anything. I just paint for my soul. And if the patients like it, I give them these drawings as souvenirs. I don't take any money." Rose grinned wryly. "And who needs your doodles? People are here for treatment, not art. If they want to join the sublime, they'll go to an art gallery. That's enough. You'd better get busy." The words of the head nurse left a bitter residue in Linda's soul. She didn't take the notebook in her hands for a few days, and then she couldn't stand it, and took up a pencil. She looked out the window and there was Tom, the janitor, waving his broom. Back and forth like a wizard, who with the help of a successful spell subordinates to his wall the leaves on the territory of the hospital yard. And over there the pigeons are strutting and drinking water from the puddle. When the sun is shining, they don't mind a swim. That's what they do. There's nothing to fear from the cats. Tom is reliable. He dispersed all of them, including the ubiquitous squirrels, which from time to time peeked at the patients through the ward windows. Once, when one of the nurses forgot to close the window, one of the squirrels even climbed in, which caused a real commotion in the ward. With a mop, Mrs. Rose tried to chase away the red-haired animal, which was climbing the walls as if they were tree trunks. "You get that thing out of here before it bites anyone." "Is it rabid?" shouted the head nurse. The subordinates only shrugged their shoulders. "How can we catch her? There she is, galloping like red lightning, even in the eyes rippling. And it is not rabid at all. On the contrary, quite friendly." Linda suggested a way out of the situation. Putting a piece of sweet bun on her palm, she asked Mrs. Rose to come out and beckon the animal to her. The squirrel looked at her in disbelief. What if she was deceitful? Was she up to something evil? But then the squirrel believed her and landed right on her open palm. Took a bite of the bun, tasted it, and was done. "You're a master, Willis. I didn't see that coming. You're like a squirrel charmer," Rose remarked. Linda smiled. "No, it's just that I love animals very much, and they feel it and reciprocate." The head nurse gave the nurse a wary look. "That Willis is crazy. She's out of her mind. She runs around with her notebook and talks to animals without fear. She should be thinking about her life. She doesn't even want a proper fiancé. She'll just sit around as an old maid with her drawings," thought the head nurse. Linda thought otherwise. She opened the door of the room, brought in clean linen, and started to make the bed. Linda tried to behave in such a way that the patients were comfortable and cozy. She always had a kind word to say and always asked about their health. How could she do otherwise? Patients should be treated with all their heart. People are being treated. After all, they are not a holiday resort. Having made the beds, Linda quietly left the room and went to fulfill another task of the head nurse. Linda had been working in the ward for 6 months already, and during this time she had learned all the intricacies of her difficult profession. Of course, she had enough troubles, but she did not complain. There was enough money for living and rent. And what else do you need? She never spent a lot of money. She tried to save money, as her late mother had taught her. Remembering her, Linda smiled, but she was not going to enjoy the pleasant memories this morning. The smartphone in her pocket suddenly vibrated, making her wince in surprise. The loud trill of an incoming call broke the silence of the corridor, which was unnaturally empty in anticipation of the coming rounds. At such times, patients were always in their wards, preparing to hear opinions and recommendations from the lips of their attending physician. Puzzled as to the identity of the caller, Linda glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. In addition, the call was a video call, which was alarming. I wondered, and who could it be? Is it even worth picking up and starting a conversation? What if there was a mistake, ran through Linda's mind. However, she did take the call. Her upbringing did not allow her to ignore the call. Even if it was false, she pressed the accept call button with her finger. In a second, a man in his mid-50s, dressed in a business suit, appeared on the screen. Linda Willis, the stranger began. "Yes, that's me. What's this all about?" The man paused for a moment, then continued. "I'm the Pedersen family notary, Mr. Peter Craig. I am charged with bringing you the last will and testament of Mr. Alex Pedersen. I hope you've heard that name before and have some idea of the scale of his business empire." Linda's feverish. "Who's Pedersen? What is this man talking about? Is this some kind of joke?" But who would want to joke about something like that in a ward for the critically ill? "I'm sorry, but I don't know any Pedersen," Linda said cautiously, feeling a strong urge to interrupt the video link. It all seemed too strange and like a common mistake. The notary smiled and, as if reading the girl's thoughts, said, "You can rest assured, Miss Linda, a mistake in such a delicate matter is simply impossible. And your name is indeed included in the will, and there is an entry to that effect in the deed of incorporation. If it is convenient for you, my office is open to you every day, except Sunday, from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It is located at 15 Maple Street. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. Have a good day and I'll see you soon." "Take care," Linda mumbled, and her smartphone screen went blank. The nurse stood in the middle of the corridor and couldn't believe what was happening. Some stranger had left her an inheritance, but for what kind of merits? And in general, who was he to her? Linda did not know the answer to this question. At that moment, a soft cough was heard behind her back. Linda turned round abruptly and her heart began to beat alarmingly. Behind her stood Mrs. Rose, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "Who's calling you, Willis?" And on a video link. Realizing that her boss had probably heard the whole conversation from beginning to end, Linda answered honestly. "It was just a notary on the phone. It must have been a mistake. He kept going on and on about a will." "A mistake, you said? That's a mistake, I'll say. I wouldn't mind a mistake like that either. And who is this Pedersen to you?" Mrs. Rose asked. There was a look of genuine amazement on Linda's face. "I mean, if I knew, Mrs. Rose. I don't know the name. Pedersen. What's his name, Mr. Alex?" Mrs. Rose grinned meaningfully. "Ah, you're not telling the truth. And you, Willis, are either faking it or you really don't remember. You've heard that name before. I mean, he was on our ward a couple of months ago. You don't remember?" "No, I don't remember, although I usually address my patients by their first and middle names. But why do I need their surnames? Especially such a one I would remember," she admitted. "You have a maiden's memory." "Well, here's the thing, isn't it? A couple of months ago, this Pedersen came to our ward disguised as a homeless vagrant. You brought him clean underwear from home and spoon-fed him. Not a bad game, I'll give you that. He was faking it. He put on a wig and came to inspect us. He was already terminally ill himself. Nothing helped. But I bet he remembered you. Why didn't I feed him soup then? Though mine will probably be better than yours," Mrs. Rose said with undisguised regret. At that moment, Linda remembered everything. "Uncle Alex, was it really him?" The head nurse shook her head. but he must have been the one who introduced himself as Uncle Alex to you. To the senior management, he was Mr. Alex. How the clinic was shaken up after his inspection. Who knew? The head of the clinic was removed for a reason. They wanted to get to the head doctor. They thought it over in time. The management then ordered that the lower-level staff knew nothing about it, so we kept quiet. I found out about it by accident. Pedersen made a mess of things. He had a month to live, and he's got the idea to reshuffle the place. Why blame me? I didn't know anything and I was helping a homeless man. Uncle Alex. I don't remember his middle name. And here's some Pedersen, Linda said with resentment in her voice. The head nurse looked reproachfully at her subordinate. I don't pretend like that, Willis. She didn't know. Of course she didn't. That dead schemer must have told you all about it. What did he want with you? It wasn't the soup. Linda's cheeks flushed with shame. How could Mrs. Rose have thought such a thing? Linda remembered the patient quite well. A sweet, kind man with sad eyes had praised her drawings and asked her not to give up. Linda had always been shy about her hobby because she was self-taught and could not draw like the recognized masters of her craft, and also always dreamed of trying watercolor or oil paints, but only there was not enough time to do it all the time, and a trusty pencil and notebook were always at hand. Linda even drew a portrait of a homeless man as a souvenir, small, childish, naive, and not pretending to mastery. Mr. Alex gently took the piece of paper torn from the notebook and pressed it to his chest. Tears glistened in the corners of the man's eyes. Thank you, darling. This is probably the most touching thing I've ever received in my life. Oh, come on, don't think about the bad stuff. It'll all work out, she replied, embarrassed, not realizing she was actually talking to a businessman dressed as a tramp. It was only now, after the notary's call, that Linda realized that she might be in for a lucky break. It was not long before the end of the working day. She was looking forward to it with great anticipation. Understanding Linda's state of mind, the head nurse deliberately wanted to keep her subordinate busy so that she wouldn't even think about inheritance. All the blame was envy, black, implacable, and extremely insidious. Rose was about 40. Her husband was a simple laborer. He worked as a driver of a grocery delivery car. Hardly a dream job in Rose's mind. She herself had once studied to be a surgeon at medical school. But an unexpected pregnancy shattered all her plans and dashed her hopes of becoming a doctor. Having taken a leave of absence, Rose never returned to her studies, and after her maternity leave she went to work as a nurse. Thoughts about the lost opportunity did not give her peace, forcing her to vent her anger on her subordinates. The most suitable for this purpose was Linda, who did not snap at her and obeyed all instructions without complaint. However, Rose's power was not unlimited. It had been a busy day, and at first Linda hesitated whether or not to go to the notary. But then, after weighing the pros and cons, she decided to go. Well, what have I got to lose? Nobody's waiting at home anyway. And the notary clearly said he'd like to see me as soon as possible. Okay, I'll go in. I'll see what happens, Linda thought and went to the address. She had never been to a notary. She had never had to inherit an inheritance, nor had she had to buy or sell any property. Her family had always lived modestly. Her mom worked as a packer in a factory, and she never knew her dad. Linda's love of medicine was instilled in her by her grandmother, Mrs. Nancy, who worked as a nurse in a children's clinic. When she retired, she moved to the receptionist's office, where she worked until age took its toll. Mom and I were unlucky with our husbands. I was widowed early, and your mom raised you alone. A woman once told me a very surprising thing, that some of the locals have a grudge against our family. That's why the women in our family are so unhappy, Grandma Nancy used to say in heart-to-heart conversations with her granddaughter. What kind of offense is that, Grandma? Maybe you should just apologize, that's all. That's what we always do at school, Linda asked as a high school student. Mrs. Nancy sighed sadly. Here's the old-timer saying it was all my grandmother's fault. Her fiancé betrayed her the day before the wedding, and she went to the river to drown herself. She jumped in, but when she fell into the water, she changed her mind. But a guy was passing by, saw her and jumped into the water. Saved her, of course. My grandmother was grateful, but after swimming in cold water, the guy got very sick. He developed a terrible disease and was bedridden. He remained bedridden for the rest of his life. His parents blamed my grandmother, saying she had ruined their son. But my grandmother was a kind-hearted person. Linda looked at her grandmother with undisguised interest. "What do we do, Grandma? How do we fix the mistake?" I wish I'd known. And that woman, I don't know who she was. Maybe a fortune teller, maybe a seer. But she told me to perform a miracle. Then, she said, the evil fate would leave us alone. I tried to go to work as a nurse to help people, but everything just stayed the same. Green boredom, Grandma Nancy used to say. Many years had passed since that conversation. Linda's mother passed away, followed by Grandma Nancy. Linda has been alone ever since. No, she had distant relatives, of course, but they had no desire to meet. And Linda had only her grandmother's cottage in the village, a house which, as well as nearby houses, by that time was being actively resettled and prepared for demolition. There were rumors that a holiday resort for wealthy people was to be built in its place. Linda was repeatedly persuaded to sign the resettlement papers, but she always refused. She loved her late grandmother too much to agree to sell her memory for a pittance. In retirement, Mrs. Nancy was actively engaged in the cultivation of flowers and fruit trees. What she did not have on the homestead: dwarf cherries, apples, pears, plums, and even peaches. And what flower beds! It was breathtaking. And how could such beauty be given to bulldozer caterpillars for destruction? Finally, the notary's office appeared ahead, and Linda breathed a sigh of relief. That's it. There's no turning back now. Once she was here, she had to go all the way. Coming closer, Linda saw a foreign car parked in the car park with a young couple in it. The nurse immediately recognized them as representatives of the Golden Youth, a boy major and a girl to match. Noticing her, one of them said aloud, "Here comes a country girl." The notary must have called her. Couldn't wait for the family to get acquainted. Linda's cheeks flared up at such unpleasant words. She quickly ran up the stairs, pulled open the door of the notary's office, and hesitated. Inside, there was no place to fall: businessmen in business suits, their companions in equally expensive dresses, children, teenagers, distant relatives, and even the late Mr. Pettison's servants were all waiting for the announcement of the will. At the same time, everyone present had a strong dislike for each other. If the notary hadn't been in the room, they would have fought over each other, trying to get a bigger piece. Linda said hello politely and modestly took a seat in the corner where people like her were standing. Soon the notary, Mr. Peter Craig, came out of the office and began to read out the late Mr. Pettison's orders one by one. He deliberately began at the end, listing aloud the insignificant acts of giving to servants and long-time acquaintances of the deceased businessman. To some, Mr. Alex bequeathed a small country house in the suburbs, to others a quad bike or a billiard set. As the notary went up through the text of the will, the tension only grew. Each new assignment was discussed heatedly by those present, and almost pointing fingers at the recipient. The boy major, the grandson of the deceased businessman, Mr. Nicholas Pettison, was particularly animated. He held himself defiantly, as if he already knew all the details of his grandfather's will. The most important thing was the business, which after Mr. Alex's death had been left virtually unmanaged. The businessman had no sons, and daughters were not suitable for such a complex and dangerous business, and the late millionaire had many directions for development. Mr. Alex made his fortune in fishing. No, not a simple one, but on an industrial scale. Floating factories for processing elite varieties of fish traveled along the seas and rivers of the country. The business made the owner even richer. At the same time, he never broke the law and strictly followed the rules established in the field of commercial fish extraction. In addition to the factories and processing plants, the late Pettison had several other properties that gave him aesthetic pleasure rather than profit. These included several flower greenhouses, a couple of cozy cafes in the city center, and a shelter for stray animals. Linda had learnt about all this in passing from the scraps of conversations of people waiting for their turn in the cramped room of the notary's office. Some of them, tired of being kept in the dark, went outside for a breath of fresh air, causing the front door to open with a creak of unlubricated hinges. At last the notary came to the very center of Pettison's financial empire. There was an oppressive silence in the room, which pressed on the nerves, making the heart flutter with excitement. The notary, in his usual manner, began to pace round and round, and then said, "Mr. Alex Pedersen's company is facing a serious challenge. According to the deceased's will, only 2 people can receive all the financial assets. Mr. Nicholas Pedersen," the notary deliberately paused and added in a well-practiced voice, "and Miss Linda Willis." An anxious whisper ran through the ranks of those present. "Who the hell is this? It's such a stupid last name, too. What the hell is going on?" Linda stood in the corner, unable to say a word. Oh my God, what the hell is going on? Have they all gone crazy? Or maybe it's just a dream. Now she would wake up and glance reproachfully at the alarm clock and get ready for work. But no matter how much Linda talked herself into it, the obsession never went away. She was still standing in the notary's office, surrounded on all sides by people hostile to her. The girl's salvation was that no one knew her by sight. When the notary asked Linda to come closer, it was no longer a secret. And Nicholas allowed himself to say another abomination. "Another heiress," he complained. "My grandfather seems to have lost his mind. If he decided to give everything to the nurse. He was childless, everyone knows that. And he took my mum from the orphanage. So get out of here, you cheapskate." Tears glistened in Linda's eyes. What was she in for? Fortunately, the notary intervened in time, who, like a judge in the ring, quickly pushed back the raging client. "Mr. Nicholas, please calm down. The kinship of your grandfather and Miss Linda has been proven, as evidenced by an official document with the seals of the Bureau of Forensic Medicine, a blood test." "What document?" "It's all lies. Do you hear me? Forgery, falsification. You're all conspiring to get your piece of the pie. I demand a second examination." Nicholas was outraged. Mr. Peter Craig only smiled and continued to read out the deceased's will. "The aforementioned heirs will receive their share in the business only if they succeed in one of the chosen areas within 1 calendar month: greenhouses, flower farming, or rescuing stray dogs in a shelter. There can be no other options. In case one of the heirs refuses, his share automatically passes to the other. And if both applicants fail, all assets will be credited to the account of charity funds. To win, each of the participants needs to bring the given direction to a plus, be it greenhouse farms or an orphanage. Simply put, it should bring a stable income. And the one whose profit at the end of the month is greater will receive the inheritance. Now, all you, Mr. Nicholas, and you, Miss Linda, have to do is choose a direction and get on with it." The notary's words made a lasting impression on everyone present. Here and there they began to hear sarcastic laughs at the future heirs, who had been guided by their own grandfather. Linda stood and cried, crying with shame and unbearable heartache. Only now she understood the motives for taking blood for a detailed analysis 2 months ago. Then the head of the clinic had mumbled something inaudible about a serious infection that could spread within the walls of the clinic. But he was actually taking her blood for a DNA test. That's what it was for, to determine parentage. And the scene with the dressing up as a tramp was also just to get closer to the likely heiress. The abundance of information made Linda dizzy and she fainted. She woke up in a cool and rather cozy notary's office, where the air conditioner was working and the smell of blooming jasmine was pleasant. Consciousness slowly returned to Linda, lying on the leather sofa. When she opened her eyes, she saw the worried face of Mr. Peter Craig in front of her. "How are you? Are you feeling any better? I'm sorry about the mess, but I really didn't mean for it to happen," he said. Linda shook her head sadly. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I fainted like a schoolgirl before an exam. I work as a nurse, and I've got a lot of nerve. But this is what happened. What did I get in my will? An animal shelter. Miss Linda, Mr. Nicholas has chosen the flower farm, so you see there's no choice. What am I supposed to do with him? I have to go to work. How am I supposed to keep track of all this?" Linda asked, barely containing her excitement. "You should take a leave of absence from work. Nothing will happen in the ward in 1 month. And in the shelter, in the fresh air with the dogs," the notary helpfully suggested. Linda shook her head uncertainly. "No, what holiday? It's the end of summer, and I can't get it before winter. In summer, only those who are close to the bosses and those who are friends with the head of the department. But an ordinary nurse, Mr. Peter Craig smiled. You needn't worry about that, Miss Linda. If your bosses don't approve your leave, I'll use my contacts, and they'll give you 6 months. After Mr. Alex's inspection under the guise of a vagrant, the head doctor is afraid of his name. Linda nodded. Tell me, was he really my grandfather? Or is this all just another play? Really, the lawyer answered honestly. Your grandmother, Mrs. Nancy, was in a relationship with the late Mr. Alex. They were going to get married, but they were drafted into the army. They served for 2 years, and a lot could happen in that time. Nancy found out she was pregnant a month after her enlistment, wrote to her fiancé, but he didn't believe her. Linda raised an eyebrow in surprise. How do you know all this so well? The notary coughed embarrassedly. Forgive me, Linda, it was not my words, but those of the late Mr. Alex. He was in the missile forces. He got to the rank of petty officer. He was going to stay on as an enlisted man and build a career in the army, but an accident prevented him. Once at one of the carefully guarded facilities, there was a leak of rocket fuel. A fire broke out. The fire spread to the administrative building, and civilians could have been affected. Anyway, Alex was among the first on the fire. He was young, had a lot of strength, saved everyone, didn't spare himself. Anyway, he lost his health. He spent a month in hospital, and there the doctor gave him his verdict, childlessness. He returned to the civilian labor force, tried his hand at something, and then went into business. Linda squeezed the edge of the table until her fingers ached. So why didn't Grandpa find us before? Why didn't he apologize to Grandma? Didn't he care about his daughter's fate? Why did he find me, but not Mum? Oh, I wish I'd known, Miss Linda. I think Mr. Alex was a proud man. He wouldn't back down, much less apologize. And when his illness brought him to the wall, then he realized that he had to look for his roots to correct, so to speak, the mistakes of his youth, suggested the lawyer. Yes, he did. Of course, there's nothing to say. You know, against the background of all these rich people, I felt like a beggar. First, all these scenes of deceit at the clinic, now the meeting, Linda said and waved her hand doomfully. Fortunately, by this time all the heirs had left and the notary's office was empty, which meant she could go home and deal with the unexpected inheritance. Linda could hardly stand on her feet from fatigue. She still had to deal with the animal shelter. No, not today. The morning would be wiser in the evening, she thought, and gave up on the idea of going to the shelter now. But no sooner had she taken out the key to open the front door of the house than her smartphone rang again. To Linda's surprise, the caller was the head nurse, Mrs. Rose. Willis, of course you are. You have such powerful patrons. 5 minutes ago I got a call from the head of department saying you were on holiday. Who's going to do the work? What a sly one. I don't know how it happened. Linda's answer made the boss even more angry. She doesn't know. She doesn't? Who does? You shouldn't be making eyes at anyone. You shouldn't be painting portraits of yourself, but doing your job. Linda bit her lip and then switched off the phone. And burn it all to the ground. All she wanted to do now was to rest and not think about anything. And if Linda eventually did as she had planned, the second heir of the deceased businessman was clearly not resting. Looking at his mother, Nicholas Pedersen was ready to burn her with a look. But what were you looking at? How could you let this happen? Some hospital nurse has become an heiress. Why not a tramp from the street? Why not from prison? Mrs. Vanessa frowned. You're pushing me, son, for nothing. Is it my fault that this girl is his own granddaughter? Linda's mother was my age. Who knew there'd be a granddaughter after she left? And I wasn't my father's own. I was taken in at the orphanage. Unable to control himself, Nicholas slammed his palm on the table. But this is absurd. She can't be the heiress. It's all mine, do you hear me? I don't care if I have Pedersen blood in my veins or not. Now I'll be the new fish king. Mrs. Vanessa grinned. Oh, look, son. Your grandfather used to spend months at sea to get rich. He even had to survive a storm a few times. And once he was buried in absentia when a fishing schooner sank, and he came back alive a week later. So, son, don't shout at me, but think how to put things in order. I am thinking, but I can't think of anything good. Granddad's an old geezer. But where am I? And where are the flowers? Or better still, an animal shelter. Nicholas was indignant. But you only want a modeling agency, don't you? Or nightclubs? Or maybe expensive cars? How many have you wrecked lately? 2, 4, 3. But that's beside the point. The woman had hit a nerve and Mrs. Vanessa was unstoppable. And it does, darling. Your grandfather was old, but he kept records of everything. How much a family spends on holidays, how much on international flights, cars. So he knew everything about you. My advice to you is to settle down, get smart. To tell you the truth, I've had enough of your antics, one thing and another. 3 days ago, you pushed a waiter into a swimming pool. And before that, you blocked an ambulance. What if that pregnant woman had gone into labor right there? She didn't. It was fine, Nicholas said lazily. Mrs. Vanessa looked at her son reproachfully, still laughing. But when that nurse goes round the bend, you'll sing differently. The money flow will immediately dry up, and all hope is in you. People are watching and expecting a new Pedersen, but all they see instead is a spoilt rich man with a lot of problems. Would this Linda at all decide? Close the question. Nicholas smiled. And I'm deciding. I have an idea that will put her in her place quickly. I do not overdo it. Solve more peacefully, said Mum. To tell the truth, Mrs. Vanessa didn't have much faith in her son. That's because Nicholas's father had been a failure. At first he tried everything important, and as a serious task from his father-in-law received. 5 times failed, all the comfort in the arms of his mistress, went to seek solace in the arms of a mistress. And the late Mr. Alex Pedersen was not a fool, quickly installed in the office hidden sect fee cameras and figured out what was going on. Yeah, the man was a good businessman. They don't make them like that nowadays. They're a one-of-a-kind commodity. What can I say? That night Linda practically did not sleep. The young nurse was tormented by nightmares she had never seen before. She dreamed of distant distances, fishing schooners, whose decks were strewn with flower petals, and the sea, where instead of salt water, there were money notes. Waking up in a cold sweat, the girl looked at the dial of the alarm clock and shook her head. The habit of getting up early persisted, even though today was the first day of her holiday. After a hasty breakfast, Linda began to get ready to go to the homeless animal shelter. According to the rumors, most of the animals there were dogs, and the percentage of cats was negligible. It is understandable. A cat is an independent and less conspicuous animal than a dog, and a dog can fight back in case of anything. So they are the overwhelming majority in the shelter. Linda found this small building uncomfortable. Gray, monochrome walls, bars on the windows. Everything looked like a miniature prison. The only thing missing was barbed wire, Linda thought, and pressed the bell. It didn't take long. Soon there were footsteps and the sound of the lock turning. Linda drew in her breath to greet the caretaker of the orphanage. She saw a boy of about 10 years old standing in front of her, followed by an older man leaning on a wooden cane as he walked. "Hello," she said in embarrassment. "Good afternoon, young lady." "Good day to you too." "Come in, welcome," said the man with a strange irony in his voice. "Thank you," Linda started. "We know who you are. You're the new owner of the orphanage," the boy finished for her. "Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it is." Linda answered and closed the door behind her and stood hesitantly on the threshold. There was a characteristic thick odor in the room, typical for places where animals congregate. "Come in, sweetheart, don't be afraid. I'm Mr. Gregory, and this is Matthew, our Matthew. And I'm Linda," she smiled. Soon the whole trio were sitting in a small room drinking tea and lambs. Most of the talking was done by Mr. Gregory, who proved to be a good storyteller. The shelter here is designed for 150 dogs, but we can accommodate more if we want to. The main thing is to keep the funding coming in. The building is empty anyway. It is possible to equip a veterinary center and a pharmacy at the shelter, if only there was money for food and medicine. We haven't been able to find a vet yet, so I'm taking over. "Wow, you have such an education," Linda marveled. Mr. Gregory coughed embarrassedly and ran his hand over his full beard. "What an education, my dear. 7 grades only. I'm a former huntsman. I've been in the woods with my father and grandfather, and I can read tracks as well as any book. How did you end up here? Linda couldn't help herself. Yeah, it's a long story. I wanted to connect my life with the forest, but it didn't work out. One day in spring, a bear and her cubs ended up by the river. The sick one was standing on the bank, tears in her eyes. Well, my heart trembled. I fed her well, once, twice. It didn't occur to me that she'd get used to me, trust me. And then what happened? Linda asked, sensing a bad outcome. Mr. Gregory brushed away a tear. What then? It's embarrassing. The poachers were after the bear, and they took her down in 3 barrels, the scoundrels. The cubs, 2 twin brothers, were orphaned. You see, honey, I'm the one who set her up. I got her used to fish, to the smell of man, to my voice. Well, you see how it turned out. I saved the cubs, of course, and fed them, he continued. Were they killed? Matthew asked. A bitter tear slowly trickled down Mr. Gregory's cheek. How could I have let such a thing happen? I took the guns away from them, and my right ear was gone. But they had connections, so they went to the right place, pulled the right levers, and they arrested me publicly in front of the whole village. The investigation was quick. In fact, I didn't deny anything. Anyway, they gave me 4 years. While I was in prison, my wife was still waiting. And when I was crushed to death in the woodpile, she filed for divorce. The village has been in trouble ever since. But after I finished my sentence, I went to the city. As soon as I see pictures of the forest, I cry. No one would hire me now. Linda shook her head doubtfully. Why wouldn't they hire you? You bet they will. You're such a positive, fair man. Mr. Gregory waved his hand. Oh, come on. It's no big deal. Who needs an ex-con? And a limp? It took me a long time to find a job, of course, everywhere. Nothing but rejection, nothing good. Then I got a job at the cemetery. It's a quiet place. And I was never afraid of the dead. You should be afraid of the living, not the dead. Linda nodded in agreement, admiring the courageous man's stamina. You've had a rough life, Mr. Gregory. He just smiled. Come on, it's no big deal. I worked in a cemetery for a short time. I fed the stray dogs. It was a pity for the poor creatures. But they kicked me out of the cemetery for that. And then Mr. Alex got me a job at the shelter. I've been doing it ever since. Me too, with Granddad, Matthew shouted under the window, which made the audience laugh. Only a little later, when the boy ran off to check on the newborn puppies, Mr. Gregory said quietly, The homeless man is our Matthew. The late Mr. Alex was helping. He gave orphans jobs at the orphanage, as long as they didn't wander the streets and didn't take anything bad from older boys. And in return, he fed them, clothed them, bought them toys. Linda's heart ached. How much her late grandfather had managed to do, and she was still hesitating whether or not to take over the orphanage. Walking from enclosure to enclosure, Linda could see the longing in the eyes of the pets, who dreamed that one day they would have loving, reliable owners, and they would not let them down. They would respond with mutual love and devotion. To Linda's surprise, Mr. Gregory knew almost everything about his charges, nicknames, illnesses, circumstances that brought them to the shelter, and many other things that an outsider could not know. We'll clean up, Mr. Gregory. We'll renovate. We'll get a good vet, Linda said firmly, realizing that there was a lot of work to be done. At the same time, her rival Nicholas was not thinking about the orphanage at all. Not only that, but he didn't care about the development of this business line. In general, Nicholas's plan was quite simple: to hire a couple of vagrants from the street. He intended to use them to open cages with stray animals, thus releasing them into the wild. In his rainbow dreams, the Major already saw that the stray dogs would certainly create panic in the city, and maybe even bite someone, which would be to his advantage. Then the new heiress would definitely fail and would not be able to participate in the battle for the inheritance. He was waiting for the right time to attack. Nicholas lived his usual wild life, until the morning partying in nightclubs, and during the day slept at home, not noticing the judgmental glances of his mother. Linda began to work with all responsibility. With some of the money allocated for the pets, She bought paint and transformed the appearance of the shelter. Now everyone who passed by the shelter could only smile at the sight of the rainbow and the rising sun on its walls. She kept her main goal in mind, finding a vet who would agree to work on her terms. That's where the first setbacks awaited. Mostly it was due to the fact that none of the eminent doctors in town wanted to cooperate with them. The explanation was quite simple. A veterinarian is a highly specialized profession, and there were very few specialists of this level in the city. And veterinarians with a good reputation and name already had their own clinics or offices, which brought them a stable income. They didn't see any point in Linda's idea, and she wanted nothing more than to open a specialized center to help all animals, both stray and street animals. Mr. Gregory was always complaining. "No, we're not going to find anyone, love. You can't find a specialist like that anywhere in the world. No, I'll help out, but I can't stay on my feet for very long. What if I have to have an operation? What then? I'd collapse to the floor on crutches." Linda nodded sympathetically, understanding the situation of the unfortunate man who had to endure such trials in his old age. And when it seemed that it was impossible to find a specialist, luck smiled with all 32 teeth. And it all began with that one day Matthew ran up to her and excitedly called out for the territory. "Linda, there's a man here. He's very strange." Strange, she was surprised. Well, he was very big and round, like in the fairy tale about the Kolobok. Linda shook her head and went to the gatehouse. At the entrance stood a very fat young man with a neat leather suitcase in his hands. When asked about the purpose of his visit, the guest answered quite simply, "I am a veterinarian and would like to work with you." Linda's first thought was that the guy was just joking. He didn't look like a doctor, even an animal doctor. He looked more like a weightlifter who'd given up on sports and stopped watching his weight. "Tell me, do you have a degree, please? Or references from a previous job?" Linda asked cautiously. The guy scratched his head thoughtfully and then said, "A diploma. Well, I have, of course. But I haven't had time to get references yet. I just graduated from university. Now I'm looking for a job. I did my internship at a well-known clinic." Linda looked to Mr. Gregory for support, but he nodded discreetly. "Take it," she said. "Looks can often be deceiving. The boy might turn out to be capable, and even if he wasn't, he could never use an extra hand." As it turned out a little later, the vet's name was William Smith, and a little insecure, he grew up in a village where his mother worked as a milkmaid and his father as a lorry driver. "I was born big like my dad. He used to come to the table, take the bottle by the neck with one hand, and drink it in one gulp." William used to talk about his past. To the surprise of Miss Linda and Mr. Gregory, the boy was very capable, especially after he had almost single-handedly operated on a dog wounded in the side. William also really loved animals with all his heart and did everything he could to make them get better. He could spend hours with a sick dog, acting carefully and painlessly. In turn, the animals could feel his warmth and were never afraid of him. That's the first time I've ever seen that, honestly. And I know a thing or two about it. A dog would never pretend. He can smell deception a mile off. And this bloke's a real wizard. I'm telling you, Mr. Gregory kept saying. Gradually, both he and Miss Linda grew to respect William. Because of his size, the boy often had problems in life when his peers hurt him and he could not catch up with them and fight back. The older William got, the bulkier his waist became. He was not fat at all, but rather large. That was a different matter, although such statements did not protect him from the ridicule of his peers, first at school and then at university. When it came time for the prom, all the girls of the class turned away from him, turning him into an outcast. But he did not lose heart, not at all. By nature, he was a fighter for honesty, kindness, and justice. However, only a few understood it, because not everyone could look into the depths of his broad soul. To hide the shortcomings of his figure, he had to wear shapeless clothes, which immediately caught the eye, especially girls who notice almost everything. Trying to cope with excess weight, William enrolled in one sports section after another, but there was still no result. On top of that, the stress he received during training, caused by the ridicule of others, he ate sweets and drank soda. Did anyone really feel sorry for him? Did anyone see him as a person rather than a giant sack in that jumper and those same bulky jeans? Probably not. To everyone, William appeared to be a fat man who had lost control of himself and his body. But whenever he saw a sick dog or kitten, he was instantly transformed into someone else, strong, confident, and determined. Sometimes it seemed to Miss Linda that he was two people at once, William, the country boy, and Mr. William, the vet with the golden hands. "Mr. William, do you have a fiancé or a lady in your heart?" Mr. Gregory asked an awkward question, and then stopped himself when he realized that he had said something stupid. William was visibly embarrassed, but did not avoid answering. "No, Uncle Gregory, there's no one. Mom always told me there must be many good men, and I believed it. It's all a lie. I want to be like everyone else. And your fiancé? I had a fiancée, but she dumped me 6 months before graduation. She found a rich guy and left me. He wasn't much different from me, but money works wonders," William said. Linda looked at him sympathetically and suggested a way out of the situation. "How about I work out with you? You know, jogging in the mornings, the gym, you'll have support. I could use the practice. But let's make a deal. If you miss a single training session, you can't count on my help anymore. Okay? Okay?" William's eyes lit up with hope. "Of course it's okay. But don't even think about skipping practice. You won't be able to get out of training," she said. Mr. Gregory smiled. "Now that's really serious talk. I'm with you all the way. If I could get rid of my leg problem, I would give you a head start. And what a head start. And I also want to study, so that boys on the street did not offend." To everyone's amazement, little Matthew declared, which caused a friendly and joyful laughter. From that day on, Matthew, Linda, and William began to exercise together. In the mornings they went jogging, and in the evenings they went to the gym. However, Matthew was not allowed to go to the punching bag because of his small age, but he found other things to do. A month flew by unnoticed. During this time, the shelter for homeless animals changed beyond recognition. Firstly, it became much nicer in appearance. And secondly, the fame of a talented veterinarian named William spread outside the city. From the very morning, owners of cats, dogs, and other pets in need of help queued up to see him. Prices for the young vet services were the lowest in the city, and the level of service far exceeded the bar set by competitors. But Nicholas Pedersen had only to bite his elbows in envy and wait for the end of the month, when all the assets of his late grandfather's company will go to Linda. The idea of freeing stray animals from their cages didn't help the rich man either. Not only that the clever dogs did not run away, but they also drove into the cages of scoundrels, who under cover of night penetrated the walls of the shelter. What was the surprise of William and Mr. Gregory when in the early morning they found 3 frightened bandits in the cages? The most interesting thing was that they had locked themselves in from the inside, fearing the vengeance of the furious dogs. As it turned out later, not a single animal left the shelter building. During this time, the dogs and cats had become so accustomed to their protectors that they would not abandon them under any circumstances. When Nicholas found out, he was angry and tearing his hair out. The plan was falling apart, and the moment of reckoning was so near. But when the day came to summarize the results, Linda once again shocked everyone. "I renounce my inheritance. I don't want it. It belongs to you and no one else. I want to keep the animal shelter and the greenhouses with the flowers that Nicholas never finished." The notary looked at the young heiress with surprise. Was she joking? She might change her mind. But Linda stood firm. "Choke on your greenhouses and your dogs," Nicholas said mentally. "Money decides everything now," he said aloud. In his mind, he was already dividing his late grandfather's capital and imagined himself a young millionaire with a claim to be a billionaire. But Linda didn't need all that. During her time working at the orphanage, she realized the main thing. No money is worth sincere feelings coming from the heart. And also nothing can replace the cheerful laughter of children and the devotion of a faithful dog who wants to lick you from head to toe at every opportunity. But the most important thing was the love that had settled in Linda's heart, a real feeling that came from deep within her heart. During the time she worked side by side with William, she saw him from different sides and realized that she couldn't dream of a better life partner. William began to exercise actively, enjoying every new day. Of course, as his figure was still far from universally recognized standards, but the guy was not discouraged and went to the realization of his cherished dream. Linda never returned to work at the hospital, as she had no time for that, especially since she and William were preparing for the wedding that would give them custody of little Matthew. Nicholas Pedersen outsmarted himself. Without knowing the basic rules of business, he signed business contracts in nightclubs and restaurants, signing a series of failed deals that brought his grandfather's company to the brink of bankruptcy. He was inattentive to detail, which ultimately led to his downfall. Nicholas was not helped by his mother's admonition, nor by the advice of colleagues and numerous mistresses. Where there is no discipline, there is no success. Count on wealth was simply impossible. But Linda, the chance given to her by fate, used fully. Over time, she earned the nickname Flower Lady. Thanks to the greenhouses of her late grandfather, she brought flower farming to a whole new level, allowing her family to achieve wealth and financial independence. Mr. Gregory was the one who was happiest about it. Linda and William were about to have a new addition to their family, which meant that their house would be filled with children's laughter. Yes, Judy traded in that cottage cheese, chopped up the nuts for the yak roll. She was mentally grappling with the dilemma of whether she should get into the venture of this New York wedding. An extra income to spend on herself certainly wouldn't hurt. But there would be a lot of strangers at a rowdy gathering in a restaurant. She wasn't a fan of such drunken hangouts. Yesterday they'd heard the usual spin at the local market in Chicago, winding up their perennial song, "Hold on, beautiful. Give me your hand, give me a coin, and I'll tell you the whole truth." Or immediately switch to "Men, don't hurry to leave. There's a surprise waiting for you at home. Do you want me to tell you?" What a trick it was to guess the future and guess the past. Only Judy really knew how to do. For her, Hannah took company to confuse, attract, distract, talk, swindle more money, take valuables right off the victim and drag her away. They both knew how to do it. Judy was a little ironic about her trade as a fortune teller. For a long time, she didn't believe she had any special abilities in that field, although she had the prerequisites. If her mother only made it seem that she could guess, as if she could see through everyone at once. Her maternal grandmother kept silent about it, but had such a sharp eye, as if she could see through X-rays. She could even tell how long the poor man had to live before the birds flew off, to the fact that she herself would soon be on her way. The grandmother cut off her little granddaughter's talent at once, but she said nothing to the gypsy tribe about it. She kept telling the girl's mother, "Let's wait until the time is right, or the Baron will start sending the little girl to the trade from childhood. Let her have at least a little piece of carefree childhood." It was as if she had seen into water. There were few carefree years in her destiny. Judy's temper wasn't weak, and her husband Joe hadn't had a bad night so far. She heated his borscht, his pie, but brought little money from the market. It was all her fault. They were married by arrangement. Joe didn't like his wife, but he tolerated her. She went into her corner of the house like a prisoner. One thing she'd been good at for 16 years was giving birth to children beautiful, greedy, perky. Judy was third in line after her two older brothers. She was followed by the carefree Hannah, and then a younger brother. Then the heavens decided that this family had enough children. The whole friendly company grew up, absorbing the traditions of their people with their mother's milk. At first, Judy, a pretty young gypsy girl, was not taken seriously at the market. They took her into the general crowd of women of various ages, who trafficked in the marketplaces and near the train stations, for numbers. The situation changed by chance. Gypsies, like kites, pounced on some modest girl from the provinces, surrounded her and talked at cross purposes. "Why are you crying? Come on, let us tell fortunes, let us help you." The girl responded, "Hopefully my fiancé received a funeral from a hot spot, and I carry his child under my heart. I can't stay alone. We have no orphanage, and no one else in this world." At the sound of the young woman's voice, Judy felt as if bells were ringing in her head. A picture swam before her eyes: a hospital bed, an unconscious boy with a bandaged head, doctors' voices saying that the fighter had no papers. She abruptly tore toward the crying mommy-to-be, shouted in her ear, "Your fiancé in the hospital is alive, lost his memory. Go to the military department, look for traces of him." Taking a breath, she added, "Give me your hand and a coin, my good girl, I'm not lying. I'll come here once a month, on a Tuesday like today. One day you will come to meet me not alone." She said the last words in sepulchral silence. The other gypsy women were silent. They knew how to mislead gullible citizens. But there was something convincing in Judy's speech that made them believe that she was telling the truth and not deceiving the unfortunate woman. Surrounded by the crowd, the young woman remained silent. Then she answered eagerly, "I give you my word, if my soulmate turns out to be alive, we will come to meet you together." The incident with the prediction became a kind of legend in the Tabor. At first everyone laughed at Judy's confidence in her prediction, but everything turned out just as she had told the woman. 3 months later, 2 people were waiting for the young gypsy at the train station, a smiling guy with a large scar on his face, and a girl who was already quite rounded and radiant with happiness. They brought a huge bunch of wildflowers, hugged Judy, and thanked her. Does this story sound like a fairy tale? Not at all. Wise life does even more incredible things to people. Now Judy was sent to work every chance she got. She even had her own clientele, and every time it was the same bells ringing in her ears and visions of pictures. Sometimes she could catch words. Judy thought there was nothing mystical about her abilities. It's just that sometimes Providence gives a person the gift of seeing a little more than others. But there was nothing magical or witchy about that talent. She suspected that her grandmother had been the same way with predictions, but she, like Judy, never told anyone about her quirks. They wouldn't believe her. They'd think she was crazy. And Judy was married off at 16. Tribal customs were rarely broken. When a beautiful girl was ripe, why waste time? It's true that gypsy women age much earlier than women of other ethnicities. Some women would give birth to several children in a row. At 30 to 35 years old, the husband already sees an old woman in front of him, or, at best, a mature, older woman. The female sex in the Tabor suffered a lot. They only had time to walk free while they were listed as potential brides, without much care and hard labor, and then children appeared. Household and work to deceive gullible victims took away women's time and beauty. Judy's fate was like that of many, but she became a widow 3 weeks after her wedding. The young husband and his older men had wandered into the wrong private farm with a high fence. A shot in the back caught the boy near the stables. From then on, Judy wore a shawl, an apron, and beads of coins instead of beads. She lived in her husband's clan, following the laws of the Tabor, the same for all. So today they stood and wandered through the marketplace, looking people over carefully, and then their adventure found itself. A tall, brightly colored, richly dressed girl was strolling through the rows of exotic fruits. When she saw the gypsies, she stopped like a stumbling block. Then she went to them herself. There was no need to lay verbal snares or traps of sweet promises. Judy sensed who the girl walking toward them from afar was. The shiny outer wrapping was only a mask. In the strange young lady's chest beat a kind, merciful heart, and the fortune teller also saw a beauty in a wedding dress, on which a dirty stain darkened on the side. The bride was in danger. But she had no idea of it. The girl came closer to the gypsies and smiled radiantly. "How do you do?" "I've been looking for you," she said bluntly. "Unlike other cunning customers, it would not have been difficult for me to find out where you live in the city. But I didn't think it was appropriate for me to come into a foreign monastery with my own rules." Judy squinted. "Why did such a beautiful woman need us? Do you want to fortune-telling, to find out your fate?" "I've never hurt my little sister," she said. "If she wants to have fun, to cheat someone out of money, I'll give way." But this time she was adamant. "Stand back, I'll talk to this girl myself, or I'll tell fortunes if she wants." Their vis-a-vis again smiled broadly. "Then let's get acquainted," said the girl. "I'm Hannah. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. I want to give our guests an exotic surprise by inviting a gypsy woman to read fortunes. Don't worry. You'll be treated with the respect you deserve at the event. Only I'd like to invite the best of you to the party so she can tell us what she sees without deception." Judy's eyes suddenly blurred, and then she saw Hannah again in her gorgeous wedding dress, but the hem at the side was in mud. A gray darkness, and in the bride's eyes, horror and incomprehension. What has this pretty girl bode for this strange marriage? "I'm the best fortune teller among my friends," Judy said aloud, "but I must consider whether I should come to you." I don't like the idea so far. Let's meet at the same place in 2 days. I'll think about it, and if I decide, I'll come to you and we'll talk about the terms. Hannah began to thank her, assuring her that she wouldn't begrudge her money. But Judy was not thinking now that she would be richer, that she would be able to buy fabric for a new skirt. She wouldn't have to humiliate herself in front of others to get a new skirt. In the invitation to take part in the entertainment at the wedding, she felt a challenge to her abilities, a kind of test for her gift. The young woman laid out the prepared nuts on a dough base with cottage cheese and rolled the product into a roll with perfected movements. She cooked it very skillfully in the tabor. Even the older, experienced women recognized it. So they entrusted her to make her favorite gypsy dessert. The day after tomorrow, there is a big event in her husband's family, the wedding of one of the younger sons. Another young family will move into the house. It's a good thing no one is trespassing. Their spacious room, where she and her husband lived, was left entirely to her. The young widow was feared in the clan. She was mysterious and silent. Such gypsies were best to be shunned. It had always been believed that people who were cheerful and nomadic had paranormal powers, but Judy was well aware that it was all fiction. She had no education, of course, but she was not naturally stupid. At the Baron's behest, she completed 9 grades. In an ordinary high school, she easily mastered modern gadgets, a cell phone, which she swindled from a woman aunt in exchange for information about her runaway husband. I got it up and running in no time, or rather with a few keystrokes. Yeah, I checked the contact list, Judy said. Here's Hannah's number. She'd promised to text the happy bride to see if they'd meet, but she didn't have a decision to make yet. And she remembered how, here in her dead husband's house, she had suddenly discovered a thin book about gypsies. Some foreign author had insisted that the first representatives of Roma communities had appeared in northern India, and from there they had spread all over the world. And the scientist also tried to explain the mystical things that always surround the life of this people with a halo. He saw the solution to the mysterious phenomena in the fact that the Roma from God inherent ability to be amazing psychologists. They read how a person will behave by his appearance, behavior, gestures, and facial expressions. Hence the birth of this amazing ability to guess and predict. They feel other people's souls, as if gypsies are able to extract all the information about a person. There was a knock at the door of her room. It was James, her father-in-law. "Come out to the common room. I have something to talk to you about," he said. The woman was surprised. Everyone in her husband's family treated her as if she were an alien element that everyone had to put up with. No warmth, no participation, cold, polite aloofness. And then suddenly the head of the family wants to give her an audience, a young gypsy. As if a clue immediately popped into her head. They don't avoid you because you remain a stranger to them. They're all afraid of you. The coldness of animal fear. James is afraid of your gift. You can feel it even here in your room. Judy hurried into the huge hall where everyone usually gathered on feast days. Her father-in-law started the conversation right from his seat. "Louis's," he said. "He was the oldest son in the family. He's in big trouble. The Baron himself suspects him of treason against our clan. The coffin-swearing ritual is scheduled for tomorrow. The woodwork for it is already being prepared." Judy is dumbfounded. In her 19 years, she had only twice witnessed this simultaneously frightening and strange event. It was seldom used in the tabor, only sworn on an icon. What could Joe have done that was so serious? She asked. The young woman saw that her father-in-law did not want her to know the details. But apparently he had no other choice. The essence of the ritual was that the suspect lies in a coffin specially nailed for him, James explained. He would lie in close captivity, and the kin who accused him would surround the coffin, listening intently to his every word. There was a belief that if the accused lied, if he did not confess his sin honestly, he would not live. He would go to the other world soon after the ritual, no matter how much he denied his offense. James was silent for a moment, searching for words. "I think he's being accused of 2 betrayals at once," he said at last. "We thought we'd check tomorrow. The first is that he hid money and valuables from his tribesmen. The second is that he took it to a Russian woman, having deceived the tabor. Everyone knows that you see through everyone. Talk to my eldest son tonight. Look into his soul. I want to know the truth beforehand. If it's my fault," James was silent. Judy listened to the man in silence. The accusations the gypsies made against Louis were serious. She didn't want to take part in this medieval ritual, nor did she want to meet the eldest son of a disturbed relative. There was nothing to do. She nodded her head in agreement that she would do her best. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. A wedding in a tabor is an extensive event. Even how many guests would be seated at the table, one could never guess in advance. The joyous event was just under 2 days away. And then there was the bad timing of the fight with Luis. The atmosphere in the house was getting more and more heated. The eldest son, Luis, had returned at nightfall. The head of the family immediately called Dave and drove all the curious people out of the pompous, rich gypsy hall. Even Judy was asked to leave. She looked up at Luis. He was known among his own people as a fine-looking man, just as his mother's name promised. He had been married for a long time, but had little interest in the child. Their quarters were tidy, and the children grew up well-fed and contented. He had done his duty as a man, and his 28-year-old wife seemed old to him. They'd been together 11 years. What kind of heartfelt relationship could there be, except boring duties? Louis smiled as Judy began to dig into his soul. It seemed that tomorrow's vows in the coffin didn't scare him, didn't worry him. Judy took his hand, which by gypsy terms was impertinent to a man. But Louis did not object. He knew his brother's widow was revered in the family for her gift. The young woman ran her finger along the lines on the palm of his left hand, and once again looked carefully into his eyes. "You are taking such a risk for this woman for nothing," she said. "She doesn't love you. She is ruled only by greed. You've given her expensive gifts, taken her to the fanciest restaurants and broken gypsy rules. She didn't appreciate it. I see you between two fires, in one burning the remnants of your passionate love for her, in the other, the remains of national honor. It doesn't matter now whether you swear in your coffin or tell the truth. Your life is short, and you will be buried in the same wooden box." Louis glared angrily at Judy, knowing she was never wrong in her predictions. He snatched his hand away from her. "Snake," he hissed. "You women are all the same. You don't marry gypsies for love, you spend your whole life being dominated by them," Louis said. "In the worst case, you hate them fiercely. And Slavic women are vicious, sweet as honey, manky, promising heavenly pleasures and then selling their men. I'll check my favorite woman. And tomorrow I'll tell the gypsies the truth. If I don't like my Hannah, I'd rather find out for myself. You keep your mouth shut." Louis stormed out of the hall. James appeared in the big room, giving Judy a hard look. "Tell me what you saw. Was he guilty?" he asked. The woman answered, "But you take your time. His time on this earth is ending. It is a matter of days. And then there is the wedding. Until it takes place, the family will wear mourning and the viands prepared for the table will be used as memorials." James grabbed Judy by the shoulders. "Shut up, you damn girl," he shouted. "I feel like I'm losing my oldest son. How do I get over this grief? How do I move on with my life?" Realizing that he was showing weakness in front of the woman, James faltered, wrapping his arms around his head. "Tomorrow will show how things will be," he said. "Maybe the Baron will be gracious enough to postpone the wedding because of the tragedy in our house." The bells of anticipation were still ringing in Judy's head. There was so much on her mind right now. She mustn't let on that she already knew the outcome of the story. What if everything would be wrong? But the fortune teller clearly saw everything with her inner sight, her intuition, her talent as a seer, the future of her eldest son, James. The moment he admits to the tribesmen that he's been stealing from their commonwealth. The roar of the meeting, the angry shouts, the calls for cruel punishment. Then the Baron's permission to bring the punishment 2 days later. Here was Louis rushing to his beloved with a fabulously expensive new piece of jewelry in a pouch. He has borrowed it again from the tabor, but he fears nothing. His heart burns with love and doubt. He wants to look into the eyes of his mistress Hannah, and their conversation and Hannah's ironic laughter. Some people behind Louis back. The bag with the necklace is stained with the blood of a gypsy in love. Louis's pompous funeral. Despite his actions, the tabor mourned. The coming days with their events flashed before Judy's eyes in a single string, then melted away. She touched James's shoulder with cold fingers. "You have some very tragic days ahead of you," Judy ventured. "It would be better if you rested and regained your strength now." With those words, she slipped out of the hall and hurried to her corner of the house. She would need her strength too, and tomorrow morning she must send word to Hannah that she would be willing to read fortunes at the wedding for the newlyweds' guests. She still felt that the bride's invitation would have important consequences for herself as well. She must deal with it. Hannah met her guest, full of surprises, on the doorstep of the restaurant and immediately exclaimed joyfully, "How nice of you to accept the invitation to participate in our wedding festivities. And why are you wearing a black outfit? Did you wear it on purpose to make the fortune-telling look more convincing?" "No, beautiful. In our Tabor, my husband's family is in great grief. We have sent one of us to his final resting place. Now we'll be in mourning for 40 days. Men won't even shave their beards and women won't take scissors to cut their unruly hair. But you shall not take sorrow into my heart. I will fulfill all that I promised you." In the picturesquely decorated hall, among the flower baskets, bright boughs and inflatable balloons with hearts, in her black skirt and shirt, Judy looked so contrasting that the guests immediately began to whisper in wonder, "Who is this gypsy woman? Why is she here?" Hannah didn't keep them waiting long. She approached the hostess, took the microphone from her, and loudly announced, "There is an unusual young woman at our party today. She came here at my request to add an original zest to the party. Her name is Dave. Any of you who want to know your fate on a happy day for my husband and me can talk to the fortune teller in the small room next to the hall. In the meantime, we'll continue our banquet," Hannah said, taking back the reins. Looking into the hall, she smiled. The women reached for the bar. Only her husband Max's mother, Judy, remained at the table next to her son. The offer of fortune-telling did not seem to inspire her, and she habitually told the dressed-up young ladies different stories than her heart would calm down. Today Dave was lucky. There were some ladies in the crowd excited by the marvelous opportunity. She hadn't come across any cases where someone had to be upset by a prediction. But that was except for a woman who had been whispered to by a gypsy that her husband had a second family with a baby on the way. To the gypsy woman's amazement, this news did not faze the pleasant guest. "Are you really astute?" She smiled sadly and replied, "I know about my husband's second family. It's all natural. I cannot have children, and he always dreamed of an heir." The next interesting story awaited an imposing man who decided to learn his fate from the fortune teller. "Are you surprised that the male sex also believes in the abilities of fortune tellers?" he asked honestly. "I have it because I am tired of loneliness. None of my relationships with women have not yet ended in marriage. And I want a full-fledged family, children. The years are wasting away." Hearing the man's confession, Dave suddenly felt some strange connection between him and the woman who took it lightly that her husband had another family and a child on the side. A coincidence? Then another one came up. A marvelously good-looking middle-aged woman said trustingly to the gypsy, "I was married. We lived soul to soul with my husband until I fell in love. He was rich, lucky, handsome. We had nothing. He played with me like a cat with a mouse. He'd ask me out on a romantic date with a mountain of flowers and presents. Then he'd disappear for 2 weeks. So I figured he wasn't getting close to me because I was married. Well, I did the decent thing," the woman continued. "I came home and told my husband everything as it was. I couldn't live without another man. He silently let me go, gave me a divorce. And my gorgeous chosen one, as it turned out, was just having fun, communicating with me, finding out whether I will lead on his advances. Himself at this time met with another woman with serious intentions. They soon married, already raising 2 children. Finding myself with nothing, I went back. It was as if a fog had lifted from my eyes. I tried to get my husband back. Our son had just started 1st grade. My ex-husband and I even lived together for a while, but we couldn't glue the broken cup of our love together. We split up again. Since then, he's been alone and I've been alone. No matter who we try to build relationships with, everything fails." Dave wrinkled her nose painfully. Alarm bells were going off in her head as the woman's narrative progressed, and for some reason Hannah's wedding dress with the dirty stain on the hem came into view. She couldn't put it all together, but she intuitively felt that the clue was hidden somewhere here, at this wedding reception. The flow of people wanting to know the future gradually dried up. The bride entered the room where Dave was sitting and immediately declared, "Don't think I'm crazy. I beg you to stay with me at the wedding until the end. Something's bothering me. I can't figure out what it is that's bothering me." At first, Dave wanted to give up the prospect of sitting in the restaurant for a few more hours. But there was such a touching plea in Hannah's eyes that she changed her mind. With a sigh, she agreed. The delighted bride immediately dragged her to the table, not listening to any objections. "I'll seat you next to your father's special guests. He worked side by side with them for years. and they were kind enough to fly in for our celebration. Come on, they're amazing people. And she couldn't handle it. And there's no hiding it. She was very hungry. The tables at the feast were arranged in groups. Now Hannah led her to the far cozy corner, covered with a snow-white tablecloth, set on straw. One thing kept her mind off it. Dave had the feeling that her back was being drilled by someone's unkind gaze, just like a storm in a glass of water. She turned around sharply. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Dressed-up men and women, talking, dancing, laughing, the voice of the host inviting to participate in another funny contest. At the table with food and drink, Dave couldn't believe her ears, even slowed down as she walked. It seemed to her that the people behind it were speaking in her own language. But as she listened, she realized that she understood only individual words, not the general meaning of what was being said. These guests were unusually dressed, swarthy, and the women wore numerous jeweled ornaments. The speech was calm, a little unhurried. They were Dad's colleagues from India, Hannah explained, noticing Dave's confusion for a moment. He worked in that hospitable country in the diplomatic corps. All my childhood and youth were spent in the north of India. I speak Hindi quite well. Hindi? Dave struggled to pronounce the unfamiliar word. What's that? It's one of the Indian languages that many Hindus understand. Come on, I'll introduce you. The guests at the dinner table greeted her like family, as if they had known the young woman for a long time. They treated her to appetizing appetizers and tried to pour champagne or wine into her glass. Dave put a stop to any attempt to get her drunk. It was bad enough to show up at the table drunk, or at least drunk. Gypsy women were punished severely for such things. It was better to smoke a pipe or cigarettes. This bad habit was tolerated in the tribe. I didn't realize how I had calmed down, relaxed, and felt confident among these people. She explained it to herself by the fact that she did not feel any threat or danger from them. She did not expect a trick. Meanwhile, Hannah soon found her again. She asked her if the fortune teller was hungry. Hannah asked if Dave would be willing to meet her husband Max and his mother. Both girls didn't notice that a handsome young man had followed them up from the table. What happened next was terrifying. The closer Hannah and Dave got to Max and Judy, the more woozy the gypsy woman's legs became. The figure of the groom's mother also became tense. In the fortune teller's mind, the alarm bells were not ringing, but clanging. The picture was one of an old woman standing in front of her, pointing her finger at something behind her. When it melted away like a haze, Dave saw the clue clearly and remembered one of the old fortune teller's lessons. I'll remember one very important thing. You and I are neither witches nor wizards. In the gypsy family, sometimes such unusual, special women are born who are given not only to skillful fortune-telling, but also to see through figures and faces. Do you know that gypsy women like us have enemies, women of other nationalities with an evil eye, as they say in any nation? You will always see such a person in the crowd, feel her insidious energy, her attempt to resist you exposing her, revealing her true nature to everyone. Now in front of her stood exactly that specimen of a malicious woman who could ruin the lives of others with just a black look thrown after her, with a single wish pointed at someone's back. The basis of such spoilage, envy. Such women do not need to look for witch doctors to put a disease, misfortune on a person, to surround him with problems. Hannah's mother-in-law was one of them. Dave, without hesitation, went up to her and performed the ritual her grandmother had once taught her. She spat directly at Max's mother's feet, and the crowd around her just gasped. Everyone felt uncomfortable. The fortune teller's act seemed too impertinent. Immediately, a lot of questions arose, which no one dared to say out loud. The party was ruined, and Dave herself touched Max's mother's sleeve with icy fingers and passed out. The audience became even more excited. They parted. "Please, I'm a doctor," came a man's voice with a slight accent. The man who had followed Hannah from the Hindu table was making his way to the gypsy. He quickly picked up the fainting fortune teller in his arms and asked Hannah, "Where can I examine her? Is there any separate room here?" The bride nodded readily. "There is a room in which I have been fortune-telling for those who wish to do so. There are several chairs set up in a row, and there is a large table." Tyler brought the gypsy woman into the room and thought about the fact that she smelled like strawberry soap. Why soap, he couldn't explain to himself. He just remembered a visit to his father at work in India, at the then Soviet embassy. He had needed to go to the toilet, and there were large pink bars of soap in elegant soap boxes, smelling wonderfully of something fruity. Later he asked his father what that scent was. He smiled and replied that it smelled like strawberries. Then came his studies in Russia, which had already separated from the rest of the republics. Tyler graduated from a medical institute in Moscow, practiced together with graduation, then had long internships in India and got married. Tyler's wife drowned 3 years ago, and he devoted himself entirely to his son. No woman since he had become a widower had stirred as much emotion in him as this gypsy woman. The man smiled at his thoughts. Scientists in medical circles often argue about whether people can be drawn to their bloodmates, or whether it's all fiction, because there's no such thing as blood. He was a descendant of gypsies by his mother and grandmother, and immediately felt something close, his own, native in her. After bringing his burden into a separate room, Tyler closed the door in front of everyone. To his annoyance, there was nothing from his medical supplies at hand. There was no ammonia in the restaurant's first aid kit, or anything that would be useful for such a deep faint. Hannah was shivering. He had to cover her with the blanket he'd found in the place. It seemed to him that she was dreaming a terrible dream, from which she could not escape to reality. They didn't call an ambulance. Tyler assured everyone that the gypsy woman's life and health were not in danger. He'll stay close by and keep an eye on things. She had a colorful dream. The park is buzzing with fresh spring greenery. 2 pretty girls are sitting on a bench, talking animatedly. "Judy, I want to share a secret with you," as my best friend said one. "Charlie confessed his love to me yesterday. We want to get married after sophomore year. He wants me to have a son as soon as possible. After all, he is from a close-knit family with many children. And he loves his sisters and brothers very much." The girl called Judy darkens her gaze, her eyes filling with piercing blackness. She turns to her friend and asks, "Go get a frozen one." "I twisted my leg yesterday in gym class. I'm still limping." The happy girl runs to the candy stand and Judy whispers in her ear, "Charlie's mine. I've been in love with him for a long time. Who the hell do you think you are? There will be no happiness in your family, no sons and daughters." The picture in her head shatters into 1,000 pieces. Now there's another frame in front of her, like a movie. A man and a woman in the kitchen. In front of him is a plate of frozen soup. There are tears in the woman's eyes. "I understand and accept everything as it is," she says. "We've been married for 15 years. You have always been faithful to me. We waited together for children's voices to ring out in our house. I won't hold you back. Go where your dream will soon come true. But I still can't. I can't live without you. If you can forgive me and accept me, I'll live on 2 families." A woman gets distracted by a phone call, answers it. "Sue, no, don't cry. You're imagining things. I'll meet you at work tomorrow," as agreed. "Yeah, you're right. It's a good thing you and I graduated from the same college and never parted again. Of course, I love you too." The vision fades away, and for a while she falls into an empty, dark abyss. "And what does your aunt do, if it's no secret?" The girl laughed again. "Aunt Susan, if I may say so, is a local businesswoman, or rather a farmer. She has a small farm which gives a good income. But I don't like that kind of work, so I decided to try my luck in the big city." "And how did that work out?" "It's hard to say, because I haven't lived here for a year yet. I had plans to combine work and study, but it's not working out yet." The girl held out her hand. "Give me my bag and thank you for your help. This is the house where I live." Bob was saddened by such a quick parting. This girl was not like the others. With her, the young man felt comfortable. With obvious regret, he said, "It's a pity we came so soon. You and I had such a nice conversation. I wish we could have continued chatting." The girl picked up on it. "Yeah, and you didn't even ask my name." The young man laughed. "Right. Okay, it's not too late to catch up, Bob." He bowed beautifully, which delighted the girl beyond belief. "Nice to meet you." "I'm Emily. You have a very pretty name," Bob said. The girl lowered her gaze modestly, but did not hurry to leave. She waited as if waiting for something else to happen, and Bob asked uncertainly, "Emily, can I hope to meet you?" The girl looked up. Although it was 20 degrees outside, Bob felt the warmth of the spring sun. and the thought flashed through his mind, I want those eyes to look at me for the rest of my life. Emily agreed to go out with him, and she behaved simply, without coquetry and other feminine tricks. The next day they met. Bob, as is customary in such cases, gave the girl a gift. True, it was not flowers, but a rather original composition of spruce sprigs. The gift caused Emily a childish delight. Oh, how lovely. Unobtrusive, meaningful. I'll have your gift instead of a Christmas tree. Bob made an unexpected suggestion. Emily, how would you like us to spend New Year's Eve together? After all, our meeting at the supermarket is symbolic. Moreover, I do not have a small living space, so I have a place for a real Christmas tree. The girl immediately agreed. I'm happy to take you up on your offer. To be honest, I have no one to celebrate New Year's Eve with. At first, I wanted to go to Aunt Susan's. She's been asking me to visit for a long time, but that plan is unrealizable because of my job. I have to work on the first of the month. Where do you work? Bob asked cautiously. Oh, in a restaurant. I wash dishes, of course, not a very good job, but for lack of a better option, I have to make a living in this unenviable way. Bob immediately pictured Emily in her dishwasher's clothes, and he felt a little uncomfortable. He walked the girl to the driveway and said a quick goodbye. He didn't walk home, but almost ran, and half-heartedly wondered, why am I so unlucky? For the first time in my life, I met a girl I liked, and again a bummer. How will I present such a wife to my colleagues? James Marcus will laugh when he hears about Emily's work. No, I'm done with this dating thing. But after 24 hours, Bob realized that it's one thing to set a task, and quite another to accomplish it. It's especially hard, almost impossible to deal with feelings when love has already come into your heart. 2 more days passed, and Bob realized that all his thoughts were focused on Emily. His heart raced with excitement as he dialed the girl's number, and then he heard her melodious voice. Bob, where have you been so long? Maybe you've changed your mind about celebrating New Year's Eve together. The young man said the first thing that came to his mind. Of course, I haven't changed my mind. But all these days I puzzled over what to get you. The girl laughed. Have you not yet realized that the most expensive gift for me is yourself? And do not even think of spending money on unnecessary trinkets. Smith's heart was immediately relieved. Emily may not have a very prestigious job, but she doesn't make exaggerated demands. She would definitely make a perfect wife. They celebrated New Year's Eve together. Under the chimes, Bob proposed to the girl, and instead of a wedding ring, he decorated the girl's ring finger with a metal element from a champagne cork. Emily, the man said solemnly, of course, this is not a real engagement ring, but I want our hearts to be joined today. Emily was thrilled again. It's just amazing, almost like in the movies. I'm going to treasure this ring for the rest of my life. Even if it doesn't work out, I'll keep it. Smith felt truly happy for the first time in his life. Emily, we're going to make it. We're going to be the happiest couple on earth. Emily came home and the upcoming children's party was still on her mind. All day she tried to decide what she could make a princess costume, in which her daughter Emma would look worthy. But all the outfits from little Emma's closet were not suitable for this purpose. The woman was horrified at the thought of having to humiliate herself in front of her husband, begging for money for a new dress for the little girl. Bob, as usual, will squeamishly wrinkle his nose and say for a girl of 4 years old is quite suitable for what she has in her closet. Well, you buy her this dress, she'll wear it a couple times, and that's it. Think of something, but I won't give you any money. Of course, Emily could buy clothes for her daughter from her paycheck, but she gave all the money to her husband. In their family, it was so established from the first day after the wedding, when Bob jokingly suggested to Emily to make life easier for you in your new position as a wife. I'm ready to take on the financial part. The woman in love did not see anything objectionable in this proposal and immediately agreed. All right, let it be as you say. Only a few weeks later, she realized that she had made a fatal mistake, allocating money for various items of expenditure. Her husband demanded accountability from her. He collected receipts from stores and filed them in a notebook. Bob kept a new notebook every month. In all the years they'd been together, he'd never deviated from that rule. Ashamed to admit, but even for underwear and hygiene items, Emily had to ask him and then report on the prescribed form. With such unhappy thoughts, the woman approached her house, dialing the code on the intercom. She thought, I wonder how long I can hold out, as she waited for the elevator. Martha Emanuel came out of her apartment. "Emily, how are you doing? How's Emma doing?" Emily put a smile on her face. "We're doing well. We're getting ready with Emma for the fall ball. She's going to be a princess at the party." The pensioner clapped her hands. "Oh, that's so cute. There's something about children's parties that we adults can't understand. This something is called sincerity. Children can't lie, they are always honest." Martha Emanuel looked at her young neighbor as if she were seeing her for the first time. "You're right, Emily. The thought never occurred to me." The elevator door rattled open, and Emily wished her neighbor well. But no sooner had she entered the apartment than she heard the deafening ringing of her cell phone. Emily rummaged through her bag, trying to find a means of communication. But where are you? Where could she have put you? The phone continued to ring with impatience, but the owner of the gadget only after a minute realized that it was in the pocket of her cloak. While the search was going on, she was quite nervous, so with some irritation she threw into the receiver. "Hello, I'm listening." The cell phone answered in the voice of Uncle Benjamin, her niece's daughter. "Why are you answering your uncle so rudely?" "I'm worried, you might say, all over. I'm excited about the unknown." Emily's mood changed dramatically. "Oh, Uncle Benjamin, I'm so sorry. I didn't see who was calling. I thought someone had gotten the wrong number again." I heard a relative laughing heartily. "That's what it came down to. I almost sent my uncle away. And all because you forgot about me in your town." Emily made excuses. "Uncle Benjamin, I had not forgotten. I was going to visit you, but I can't do it yet. I can't get away from work. And Emma's kindergarten party is coming up, so I have to get her costume ready." Benjamin Jackson was very happy to hear the news. "So I showed up, by the way." Emily asked in surprise. "How do you mean you showed up?" "The usual train ride." Uncle Benjamin was clearly on a roll, which pleased and frightened Emily Jones at the same time. She imagined the grimace her husband would make when he learned of her relative's arrival. But when she asked her uncle if there was room for him in the apartment, Emily answered with a feigned joy. "Uncle Benjamin, how are you not ashamed to ask such questions?" "Sure, come on over." And I'm already here at the elevator, opening the door to welcome the guest. When Bob Smith came home from work, he was only slightly surprised to see his wife's relative in his favorite spot in the kitchen. The men embraced and Uncle Benjamin offered in a hostess manner. "Come on, Bob, sit down. I brought the cash with me. I cooked my own recipe." The guest nodded toward the refrigerator. "There's a servelat and a sausage. Homemade sausage." Bob wrinkled his nose. What? Uncle laughed. "My own sausage," I said. "People gave it such a name because this unique product is prepared in the most accessible and primitive way. But it doesn't contain any chemicals. You can't buy such sausage in your supermarkets." Bob's gaze warmed a little after he learned that the uncle had not come empty-handed. After a short feast, Benjamin Jackson took out an unattractive-looking wallet and accompanied his action with the words, "Since I came without gifts, buy what you need." I didn't have time to go shopping. Bob reached for the money, but Uncle Benjamin laughed. "What are you, Bob? The family budget should be with the hostess." The guest defiantly shook the bills in front of his son-in-law's nose and then handed them to his niece. "Buy, Emily Jones, something for yourself and your granddaughter." The young woman rejoiced. "Oh, thank you, Uncle Benjamin. Emma needs to buy a dress for the fall ball. She'll have a present from her grandfather." Bob looked at his wife with an unkind look, but he couldn't help it. Emily could see his anger roiling him and rejoiced at her husband's torment. But the most important test awaited the Johnsons ahead. As Emily Jones cleared the table, Uncle Benjamin said, "Emily, I did not just show up, I need to do some paperwork." The woman didn't pay much attention to the words. She thought that her uncle had some business to attend to in town. But Benjamin Jackson, after a short silence, said with a sigh, "No intrigue. Not even interesting. I thought you were going to start questioning me. What papers? Why?" Bob decided to answer for his wife. "You take no offense to your niece. Emily has been a little distracted lately, so he doesn't immediately turn on his brain. But can you tell me? I'll explain it to her later. I intend to give my cottage to my niece, my late sister's daughter." Bob Smith's eyes lit up again with two greedy lights. Yes, that's quite a gift. And where is the ancestral cottage? Benjamin Jackson explained in his usual manner. We have it on the farm. Emily should remember. She used to hang out there with the local kids when she was a kid. I've got a place to stay myself. That's why I decided not to wait for death, and while still alive to assign the house of grandfather Emily. I made a promise to her mother that I would take care of my niece. My sister has done a lot for me and my family. Now it's time to pay my debts. The guest tapped his palm lightly on the tabletop. So tomorrow, Emily Jones, let's go with you to the notary, formalize everything properly, and then dispose of your property. Whatever you want, you can sell it, or you can live on your own. Fate is like that. You never know when or where it's going to turn. The next day, Emily took time off work to go with her uncle to the notary. They spent the whole day collecting certificates, and then waited an hour and a half for their turn under the office of the lawyer, whom Uncle John was advised by an acquaintance. When all the formalities were over, Uncle John said with satisfaction, "Well, Emily Jones, that's it. Now you have your own corner. If things get tough, will you have a place to go?" After his visit to the notary, Benjamin Jackson hurried to the station, though his nieces begged him to stay another day. "I can't stay too long, Emily. I have a household there. I almost got my neighbor to look after it. I hope you remember Aunt Anne." The young woman nodded her head. "How could I not? She used to get us with the boys with nettles when we climbed into her garden to eat cherries. I got the worst of it." Uncle John laughed. "I remember the incident well. Your mother was still alive and resented her friend's cruelty. Oh, by the way, Fred, Anne's son, is back in the family. Things didn't work out for him in the city. He's a businessman now, owns his own sawmill. But his love life's a mess. Anne was complaining to the women that her father had some kind of spell on her. I don't believe in any of that nonsense." Emily listened to her uncle, and it made her sad to realize that he was leaving again. "Uncle Ben, it's like the sun comes out of the clouds and you're leaving again. You could have stayed a couple more days. We haven't even had a chance to talk." The older man smiled. "The atmosphere in your house is not conducive to a heart-to-heart talk. You'd better come and we'll talk to you then. And at the same time, you will evaluate your inheritance. I don't think I'll be able to do that anytime soon. Maybe I'll come in the spring," Emily said uncertainly. "What's there to see? I remember my grandfather's hut well." Benjamin Jackson squinted slyly. "You should still come and see it." After seeing her relative off, Emily headed for the daycare center. She decided to pick up her daughter early so she could get to the store. "Daughter, you and I are now going to buy you a dress for the fall ball," said her mother to Emma. The girl hugged Emily. "Mommy, I will be the prettiest at the ball. I've already learned the whole poem." They returned home tired but satisfied. Bob Smith met his wife in the hallway with a reproach. "Where have you been? And why isn't dinner ready?" Emily grinned. "You could have made yourself a quick meal if you were so hungry. My daughter and I went shopping and spent the money Uncle Ben gave us. Look what a lovely dress we bought." The young woman began to hastily unwrap the roll with the main purchase, but the head of the family angrily threw the dress aside. "You've got something to brag about. A waste of money. And I can see that you've gotten a little cocky lately. To tell you the truth, I don't like it at all." Emily wouldn't shut up. "I don't like a lot of things either, Bob, but I put up with it." "And what is it that you don't like?" The man asked with a sneer. "Your pathological greed. I'm sick of begging you for pennies. I'm tired of wearing rags and holes in my pantyhose." The man said with a sneer. "If you are so tired of everything, you can go back to your farm. After all, you are now the rightful owner of Grandpa's house." Emily realized that if she answered her husband, everything could end in another scandal. Emily was very tired, and once again the young woman remained silent. 2 months had passed since her uncle's arrival in New York. The relatively warm fall was replaced by an incomprehensible off-season. It could rain in the morning, and by evening white flakes of snow were already swirling over the city. As a child, Emily had not tolerated such climatic swings well and was often ill. Her health failed her this time too. The day before, the young woman had gotten her feet wet because her old boots were in complete disrepair, and there was nothing to buy new shoes with. Emily still hoped that her immune system would be able to cope, but in the morning she felt a pain in her feet. She had to take a day off work and head to the clinic. After a long wait in a line of people sneezing and coughing, she was admitted. The young doctor listened to her lungs for a long time and then said, "I don't like your breathing. You should be hospitalized." The woman panicked. "No, doctor. I can't. I have no one to leave my little girl with. You will prescribe me a stronger medicine, and I will be treated at home." The doctor hesitated for a long time, but then he gave in. "All right, I'll prescribe you one medicine. It's very effective, but it doesn't come cheap." Emily grasped the doctor's offer like a drowning man grasping at straws. "Prescribe it. And I'll buy those pills today." The doctor wrote her prescriptions and told her to come back in 2 days. Emily picked up her daughter Emma from daycare and stopped by the pharmacy on the way home. She knew there were expensive medications, but she didn't realize the prices could get this high. Just in case, the woman asked the pharmacist, "Maybe you can offer me a cheaper analog?" The girl in the white coat rounded her eyes. "I would love to, but this drug has no analogs. Will you take it?" "Not yet." Emily took the prescription back. By evening, the fever had risen even higher, and the woman tried everything to bring the fever down a little. Bob watched his wife in silence and expressed no sympathy. Only towards nightfall he said with evident displeasure, "I don't want you to make me sick. Until you get better, sleep in the living room." Her husband's words were the last straw. Even though Emily could barely stand on her feet, she spilled everything she had accumulated over the years of patience on Bob. "I can't believe he's afraid of catching a disease. Dear husband, do you want to give me some money for my medication? The doctor prescribed me some effective pills. He said I can be cured in 2 days." "Well, will you give me the money? Or is it greed that prevents you from showing mercy even to your own wife?" Bob Smith raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You can talk, but I'll speak frankly. I believe that it is not necessary to buy expensive pills. You can bring down a fever with a simple medicine, and I'll tell you that you're sick because you're nervous. You should move more. Then no disease can get the better of you." Emily couldn't remember herself. "You're a spender yourself. One day you'll choke on your money, and no one will help you." The man was furious. He didn't expect such unforgivable insolence from his always submissive wife. "You dare insult me in my own house? Get out of here. Get out with your things and live on your pittance." Emma was awakened by her father's shout. The girl ran out of her room in tears. "Daddy, why are you yelling at Mommy?" Bob knew he shouldn't scare a small child, but he couldn't control himself. "I'm yelling because your mom wants too much. All she knows how to do is demand, and I'm not going to waste my blood money on her dubious schemes." Emily lashed out at her husband. "So my health is a fool's errand for you. Money is more important to you. You think I don't know that you deposit the lion's share of your salary in a bank account?" The man yelled. "How do you know? Have you seen the statement? Did you go through your shirt? I found it when I washed your clothes." The man finally lost his temper. "You're going through my pockets. Get out. I don't want a wife like that." Emma cried even louder. "Daddy, you're bad. You're bad too. If I'm so bad, get out of here with your mommy. Get out of here." He was out of control. Emily, holding her daughter close to her, watched her husband throw her and her little girl's things out of the closet. The woman froze in a stupor, temporarily forgetting her illness. Bob Smith, on the other hand, couldn't control his anger. He threw everything he could get his hands on the floor. "Pack your things and get out. I can live without you. Emily didn't live up to my trust. I'm practically a god to you. You're just like all the other self-serving and ungrateful ones." Little Emma was the first to recover from her shock. "Mommy, I'll do the packing. And you give me the bag." Emily packed her things in a suitcase and a travel bag. Without a word to her husband, she and her daughter left the apartment. The woman understood that it was useless to look for a shelter at night, but suddenly remembered about a kind neighbor who had helped her more than once. Martha Emanuel was very surprised when someone rang her doorbell at such a late hour. When she saw Emily, pale and tangled in her shawl, and Emma, the old woman understood. "Emily, come in. I guess you're in big trouble." But if you don't want to, you don't have to tell me. In any case, I won't refuse to help you." The young woman told her neighbor about her illness and her husband's wild antics. Martha Emanuel was struck by her story. "Is your husband so stingy that he spares even for the child?" "I would never have thought, because on the look of such a decent man and dressed well," Emily said tiredly. "For himself he spares no expense. It's me and the little one who are like unwanted ballast for him. It's a pity I've only just realized it." Martha Emanuel wisely remarked, "Nothing, my girl, you are still very young, and you have everything ahead of you. I am the one who has nothing to look forward to. Tell me, please, who is the man who came to you in the fall?" Emily looked at the pensioner with interest. "That's Uncle John, my mom's brother. He's been living alone for a long time, and he came to give me the deed to his father's house." The neighbor girl perked up. "That's very good. So you have somewhere to go?" Emily and Emma stayed with the kind neighbor for a few days. The young woman tried to settle the formalities at the daycare center and at work as quickly as possible. She still had hope that Bob Smith would come to his senses, apologize to her and her little daughter. But that didn't happen. After a week of waiting, Emily finally decided to leave. Martha Emanuel saw her and Emma off at the station. At the moment of parting, it was very touching, and the elderly woman confessed, "Emily, I sincerely envy you, because you have a chance to change your life for the better. I don't have that opportunity." Emily hugged her neighbor and said quietly, "Aunt Martha, I'll be sure to call you, and I'm sure we'll meet again very soon." The train moved smoothly. Martha Emanuel waved her handkerchief. The old woman's mind was full of thoughts. Her heart was filled with hope that all was not yet lost. Bob Smith opened the door of his apartment and looked around the hallway. He found no sign of intruders, though he would have liked to see such signs. It had been almost 3 years since the night he had kicked his wife and young daughter out. The man was sure then that within 24 hours Emily would come begging him tearfully, "Bob, I'm sorry I overreacted. It won't happen again." But a day passed, then another. The wife was in no hurry to come forward. Bob knew she'd been taken in by a neighbor on the first floor. After a week of waiting, which was not easy for him, he called Martha Emanuel's apartment, and she was not surprised to see him without a hint of gloating. The woman calmly said, "Your wife and daughter just left today." Emily said her uncle gave her a house. She went there. I saw them off. This news only caused annoyance. But Bob wasn't going to give up. Every night he mentally argued with his runaway wife. True, this argument was more like the monologue of a resentful loser. Bob Smith wondered aloud, "What have you proved?" "Only that you're a stupid provincial idiot. So you'll live in your Uncle John's house, living in poverty. Because you, Emily, you've got nothing. You didn't even bother to go to college. And believe me, no one wants an uneducated woman like you. You should have stuck to me with your hands and feet and not shown your true self." The role of the ungrateful wife was usually played by the teapot, but sometimes Bob Smith addressed his appeal to the refrigerator or washing machine. Every day the loneliness grew greater. In addition, his soul was soothed by the thought that his former wife suffers even more. Johnson hardly remembered his little daughter, for always, since her birth, he had considered the little girl a part of his wife. No affection for his own child, the man did not feel. But there was something in Bob Smith's life that stimulated him to live. And that compelling factor was a bank account. After his wife's elopement, he'd put away almost his entire paycheck. He had to save on everything, including food. But Bob reassured himself it's okay. It's just a little bit of patience left. Johnson's cherished goal was the sum of 10 million. He dreamed of investing these savings in some profitable business. This was hinted at by James Marcus, to whom he accidentally blabbed about his bank account. The former classmate was not surprised. He even praised him. "Johnson, you are good. You're a good friend. I'll be honest with you. I'm also saving a little bit to start my own business. And I even have one creative idea about it. It's possible that you and I could be partners very soon." "Oh, brother, we're getting rich." Marcus spoke to him as an equal, and it inspired Johnson. Long ago in his youth, Bob had felt the wings behind him again. He believed that all his sacrifices would pay off later, and he would live a long and very happy life. Would James Marcus help him to do so? The man had tried several times to have relationships with women, but on the personal front he was still haunted by sheer failure. James Marcus laughed at him unapologetically. "Johnson, you are failing and will continue to fail if you do not change everything," he said. "And what do you think I need to do to make women treat me favorably? Don't be stingy. I realize that greed has already gnawed at your liver, but at least forget about it for a while. Show your generosity." Bob Smith realized that there was a rational grain in his friend's advice, but he could not overcome his stinginess. Greed was already ingrained in his DNA, and there was no way in nature to change that. One evening, Bob Smith was contemplating life out of habit. Suddenly, a crazy thought struck him. If Emily doesn't want to come back, I'll force her. I'll make fun of her airs. Johnson seized on the thought and began to pack for the road. He was not embarrassed by the fact that at the initiative of his ex-wife, their marriage was dissolved 2 years ago. Bob Smith still believed in his exceptionalism. On the way to the detained in the middle of nowhere farm, he imagined how Emily and her daughter were living in poverty. He was even willing to spare some money to demonstrate the generosity of his soul. But most of all, Johnson wanted to humiliate the woman who dared to disobey him. His imagination painted impressive scenes of a meeting where he was the master of the situation and his ex-wife was crying, begging him to let her return. He wanted to linger again, as in his childhood, in that reality of his own devising. But the commuter train stopped at the station where he had to get off. Bob vaguely remembered the way to the village where Benjamin Jackson lived, though he could have used the local cab drivers. The man set off on foot, asking the rare passers-by several times where Mashkina's farm was. Strangers answered him in detail and then asked him why he was going there. The man replied evasively, "I have relatives there. I decided to visit." Finally, he reached his destination. But instead of a shabby house, he saw a 2-story cottage in the center of the manicured lawns with a swimming pool. The man's surprise even took his breath away. He thought, "I must be mistaken. I'll have to ask the locals again." A woman in a bathing suit and a stylish hat with wide brim came out of the elite mansion. Bob Smith quickened his step. "I'll ask this lady where Emily lives." The woman noticed him too and waited for him to come closer. The top of her face was covered by the brim of her hat, so Bob didn't immediately recognize her. He greeted the stranger politely. "Hello, I'm looking for a good acquaintance of mine. She lives around here somewhere. Maybe you can give me a hint?" The woman took off her sunglasses, and Bob shrieked in surprise. "Is that you? But how?" Emily Jones laughed long and with undisguised pleasure at her ex-husband. After calming down a little, she said, "I knew that we will meet again one day, and 1,000 times imagined this meeting, but never thought that everything will be so prosaic. I guess you came here to make fun of me." But it turned out the other way around. A girl came running out of the house, a girl Bob hardly recognized as his daughter. "Mommy, Daddy's calling for you." Emma called out to her mother. "Michael is awake and cranky, and Daddy doesn't know what to do with him." Emily looked at her daughter affectionately. "Okay, Emma. Tell Daddy I'm on my way." The girl looked suspiciously at Bob standing at the gate. "Mom, who is that uncle?" "A passerby. He's looking for his relatives." Emily hugged her daughter, and together they walked towards the house. Bob stood at the gate for a long time, waiting for his ex-wife to show up again. But Emily never came out. Johnson was completely devastated. Only now he realized that there was something more important in the world than money, something that could not be bought even for 10 million. It was a terrible blow. But complete disaster awaited Johnson ahead. When he arrived at the office on Monday, he was shocked by the news his boss had given him. "Johnson, I'm putting you in Marcus's place. So be proud and happy." A terrible guess burned Bob's brain, but he still asked, "Where is James Marcus?" And exclaimed with joy, "Your buddy got away in a hurry. He got lucky. An unknown relative gave him $10 million. Imagine how lucky a man is. Now your friend can live happily and not think about anything." Johnson realized that Marcus had cheated him out of $10 million. It was ruin, his lifelong dream. But there was nothing he could do to change it.
The parents stood dumbfounded when they saw the boy, a carbon copy of their twins, at the train station. A 6-year-old boy stood in the middle of the station square. He was scared, looking around, and didn't know where to go. "Are you lost?" A strange woman in a brightly colored outfit approached him. Yes, tears were about to roll from his eyes, but he held them back. "Come with me." She held out her hand to him. The boy gave her his hand, and they walked through the crowd. At one point, he was frightened, broke free, and ran. "Where are you going?" The gypsy woman shouted after him, but he ran without looking back. The boy saw that the doors of the wagon were open and ran in. This very wagon was not attached to anything. It had just been standing there for many years. The boy walked along the doors, went into one of the compartments, sat down on the seat. It was warm and there was no one there. "Mom," he looked out the window, but there was no one there on the tracks. When it got dark, he was hungry. His stomach was rumbling. But he realized that if he left here, he would be picked up and taken away. And he didn't want that, because his mom would come back and he wouldn't be here. How would she find him then? He cried. Now that he was alone, he could do it. After that, he didn't notice how he fell asleep. "Hey, is there someone here?" He heard male voices in the night and opened his eyes. He was scared. "Come in, there's no one here," said another voice. Presently, two men climbed into the same wagon where the boy had been. They started rustling something, swearing. The boy heard it all. He lurked like a mouse. "Come on, let's have a proper sit down," said one. "What don't you like here?" The other one answered him. Narrow opened the compartment door of the one who wanted to sit down. He dragged some kind of sack in, and then he himself fell into the cramped space. Oh, they heard a child's cry. Who? The man started to look around, but it was dark. Now, flicked a second lighter. "How are you doing?" They saw the kid. Mom left it. He crawled out from under the table. "How did you leave it? Permanently or temporarily?" The men were stunned to find a small child here. "She'll be back," the boy said pitifully. "What's your name?" One of his buddies leaned over to his face. Alex, who was smearing a tear down his cheeks. "Don't cry, Alex. Everything will be fine. Your mom will come." The other one ruffled his hair. They, not paying attention to the boy, sat down and began to put everything in the bag. And there was a lot of stuff, mostly jewelry. They had just come back from a job that had gone well today, and now they were dividing up the loot. "Anthony, why did you give yourself so much money?" One of them started to get indignant. "Don't yell, I'll be right there." They were flicking the lighter back and forth to get a glimpse. "Are you hungry?" asked the one called Anthony at the boy. "Yes," he nodded. Alex's eyes were so big when he saw it all. The man took bread and lard out of another bag, broke it off, gave it to the boy. "Thank you," the man said. Together they spent the whole night here. When it started to get light, Anthony and his friend just left. "Come on, Pariah, don't be sour. Mom will definitely come today." They told him goodbye and left him a gingerbread. Alex looked out the window again. He was waiting for her to appear. But Mom was not there. It made him so sad that tears ran down his face again. Now, when it was light, he saw that there were blankets on top. They were all dusty and torn. But Alex didn't care. He was freezing. Slowly, he pulled one out. Pulling it up, the others fell in after him. The boy wrapped himself up, put it on the shelf and waited. In the evening, he tried to go to sleep quickly, not to think and not to be afraid. And in the morning, they found him. No, not his mother, but the station workers. They were looking for the two men who had shared the loot last night. They saw that the carriage was unlocked. They decided to check, and there was the boy. "Who are you? Where are your parents?" A policeman asks him here at the station. "I'm Alex. Mom's gone somewhere. I'm lost." He wanted to cry again. "Where did she go?" The man asked the small child. "I don't know. I couldn't help but cry." "Okay, I see. We need to call custody." He got up from his chair. The station master walked into the office. Word had reached him that a little boy was lost. He saw him and smiled. "Were you with your mom?" He leaned over and asked him. Yes, nodded the man. I've never seen her leave a child like that, the man said in a half voice. Do you know his parents? Where did she go? The man asked the small child. I don't know, I couldn't help but cry. Okay, I see. We need to call custody. He got up from his chair. The station master walked into the office. Word had reached him that a little boy was lost. He saw him and smiled. Were you with your mom? He leaned over and asked him. Yes, nodded the man. I've never seen her leave a child like that, the man said in a half voice. Do you know his parents? Yeah, and I'll call them right now. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. Alex heard all this and couldn't believe that his mom would come for him again and they would be happy. He sat down on the chair and looked at the door to see when it would open. Not an hour later, a woman burst into the office. Her eyes were frightened. She looked at the boy, and Alex sat and thought that she should leave as soon as possible because she was blocking his view. Katie and Selena met and saw each other for the first time at school when their parents brought them there. The girls immediately sat at the same desk. My name is Selena, she turned to her desk mate. And I'm Katie, the first grader told her back then. Shall we be friends? They both laughed. Yeah, Katie was okay with that. From that moment on, the girls were inseparable. They were always and everywhere together. They went to school, did their homework, and played outside. Their parents were happy that Selena and Katie had formed such a close bond. It's good if they carry that friendship through life, said Sarah, Selena's mother. Yes, they are like sisters, Olga Ivanovna, Katie's mother, agreed with her. The girls really thought they were sisters. If something happened at school, they stood up for each other. One didn't learn, the other gave advice. They did everything together. Come to my place tonight, Katie told Selena. What are we gonna do there? They were already in 5th grade. I don't know, we'll play something. Katie started to remember what toys she had. Okay, just for a little while, or it's a lot of assignments, Selena agreed with her. So they met every night, one or the other. Everything was fine with the girls. They did not think about any guys or discos. They were still young, so they had only toys on their minds. What do you want to be when you grow up? Asked Katie to her friend. I haven't decided yet. I guess I'll be a teacher, she said. And what are you? And I want to become a doctor, the girl answered with such a serious look. Oh, they say you have to study to be a doctor for a long time, Selena said smartly. It's okay, I'll help people later, Katie was sure of it. Time moved on. Now that the girls were not so young that they could go anywhere, their mothers decided to send them on vacation. They found out what vouchers were available, and for the summer the girls went to one big and famous camp in the south. They had a good time there and came back happy and tanned. How did you like it? Their parents asked them. Of course, if there are vouchers for next year, make sure we get one. The girls knew they wouldn't be bored. As the new school year began, Selena and Katie were still just as inseparable. Will you come over to visit tonight? After school, Katie asked. I don't know today. It's back to school tomorrow, her friend told her. Come, I'll show you something, Katie told her conspiratorially. What? Selena even got curious. When you come, I'll show you. Her friend didn't bother to tell her everything. Selena came home. She couldn't even imagine what Katie wanted to show her. Everything she had in the house she had seen a long time ago. Then the girl remembered that Katie kept talking about some kind of basement. She said that when they moved, her parents had shoved everything she had into that basement. Maybe she had gone to that very basement, and now she wanted to show it to Selena. She quickly did her homework, left her mom a note saying she had gone to Katie's, and went outside. Her friend didn't live too far away, so within 10 minutes, Selena was at her place. Well, what's there? Intrigued, and you can't tell. She couldn't wait to find out what Katie had found and wanted to show her. Come on in, I'll show you, smiled her friend. Selena went into the room where her grandmother offered her tea. The girl agreed because she knew that the woman made very tasty scones. While the grandmother went to the kitchen, Katie called the girl into a small room. They sat down at the table, and her friend took out an iron case. "What's that?" Celine didn't understand. "I'll tell you a story, you won't believe it," she told her. "My parents and I decided to dismantle our basement because there was a lot of junk taking up space. I asked to go with them, and we went." Just starting to tell Katie, as at that moment Grandma came in and put 2 cups of tea and a whole plate of scones on the table for her. "Thank you," they answered her with glee. "Eat to your heart's content." Grandma left the room and closed the door behind her. So when we were in there, I saw my old toys, dolls, railroad, and all that stuff. But I wasn't interested in it anymore, so we put it all in boxes and took it out to the yard. But there was still a lot of stuff in the basement, and when we went down there the second time, Dad said we should throw out the old dresser. Mom and I started pulling out the drawers to make it easier, and in one of the drawers I saw this box. I was so curious, I picked it up. But I couldn't open it for a long time, Katie continued to say. "And what? You never looked into it?" Celine wondered. She couldn't believe it. "Of course I looked in, but I didn't do anything. I left it to show you." She spoke as if it was someone's remains. "Well, come on, open up." The girlfriend couldn't wait. "Wait, that's not the whole story," stopped my friend Katie, as I was trying to open this box. "My mom came up to me and asked me what I was doing in there. I showed her. She smiled, came over, wanted to help me open it. She did it. It was really quick. Turns out it was just a matter of flipping some hardware off." Kathy told her all this. It was so mysterious and interesting. Selena couldn't wait to open the mysterious suitcase. Kathy looked at her friend, took hold of the iron bars and pulled them open. Selena saw several syringes, vials, and other medicines inside. "What's that?" She looked at her friend. It wasn't very intriguing. "Come on, look at these syringes." She pulled one out of the box. It was glass. "Well, yes, glass syringes. That's interesting." Took one and considered it Celine. "My mom told me that this box belonged to my grandmother." The girl got up, opened the doors, and called out to the woman. When Veronica entered the room, she immediately noticed the iron briefcase that had once belonged to her. "Grandmother, please tell us why it belonged to you and what you did with it," asked her granddaughter. "Oh, girls, it's a long and sad story," Grandma told them. "We're not asking you to tell the whole story, just tell us what you did with it. I was a nurse then, and that case really helped a lot of people. Now you have disposable syringes. You buy them at the pharmacy, give them a shot, and throw them away. In the past, there were glass syringes, reusable. With one syringe, I went through the whole war. My grandmother was sitting and remembering what it was like then. There's Selena. There's a reason I wanted to be a doctor. Turns out my grandmother was one, and I'm following in her footsteps," Katie told her friend right away. "Yes," she agreed. They sat for a long time looking at everything in the box. Other than syringes, there was nothing of interest. "Let's play doctor," Katie suggested. "Come on, and which one of us is going to be the doctor?" Selena realized that, but asked anyway. "Let's take turns, first me and then you," the girlfriend suggested. It was more fun that way. Kathy put on a white headscarf, went into the hall, sat down on the sofa, and waited for her patients to come in. Selena came into the room, holding a plush toy. Katie expertly placed the toy on a diaper, then examined it, drew some liquid from an ampoule into a glass syringe, and injected it into the toy. The tissue immediately turned a dark color. "Here, this is where it hurts," the newly minted doctor said. "What to do?" Looked at her friend who had brought her a patient. "We need to do surgery," Katie said. She took the blade and cut where the cloth had darkened and pulled out the dirty absorbent cotton that was soiled from the product in the syringe. "That's it. I'm a doctor now," Selena told her. Then Kathy brought a similarly plush patient to see her, and all the manipulations were repeated. After all that, the animals were sewn up. so they changed several times until Katie said she had no more plush toys to ruin. It was Selena's turn, so she pouted her lips and said that Katie had participated 4 times in this game and she had only participated 3. Okay, I'll find something. Katie went to her room. Then she brought out a doll that had a rubber head. How am I going to do her surgery if she's plastic? The girl wondered. So the head is rubber, Katie told her. Selena took the blade, held it to her head, and started to make the cut. But not a few seconds later, the blade slipped, and the whole thing went into Selena's arm. She screamed, but at that moment, her grandmother left the house. Katie, what do I do? Help me, screamed her friend. Katie took the real first aid kit they had at home, pulled out some sterile bandages, and put them on her friend's wound before they treated it all with green tea and iodine. She started winding the bandage. She didn't spare it at all. It took the whole skein on her arm. Selene was in a lot of pain because when they pulled the blade out, they had opened the wound a little. She didn't know how she was going to go home or what to say to her mother. But from that time on, she realized that Katie was a born medic. She really needs to go where she wants to go. That day at home, Selena was scolded by her mother, as well as Katie, for doing such a thing without adult supervision. What if it hadn't been a hand, but something else, or cut elsewhere, and so on, the parents said. All this time, the girls were friends, socialized, had many different adventures. And finally, the graduation, the end of all classes. Everyone was excited and prepared for this day. What are you going to wear? Asked Selena to Katie. I don't know. Soon we'll go with my parents to buy something. Hopefully we'll choose something, and you. And my mom bought me such a beautiful chiffon dress. I'll probably wear it. Selena said, come on when? Katie wondered. She began to remember the last time they had met. It had been in March, and her friend hadn't told her anything then. Just recently, maybe a month ago, now when I was leaving, he said he was coming to visit. Selena remembered Mickey. She felt sad. Wow, girlfriend, we'll be at the wedding soon, laughed Katie. Wait to talk about the wedding. You need to study a little, laughed that one. There was the whole summer ahead of us, where we could walk around and do the rest of our own things. At the end of July, Selena's young man arrived. Mickey, hi, she greeted him. How I missed you, he hugged the girl. Come quickly, I'll introduce you to your friend. Couldn't bear to do it, Selene. They came in behind Kathy, sitting in her yard. I knew you didn't pick bad people, Mickey said of Kathy. Of course, how could I do that? Since I only ever have the best people around me, she giggled. In the evening, Mickey had to leave, and his girlfriends went to see him off. When will you come next time? The girl asked him. I'll probably already wait for you. September is only a month away. It's very hard for me to get out, the young man replied. There in town, he helped his father, moonlighting for him. Okay then. See you later. She kissed him on the cheek. Mickey climbed into the electric train and sped off into the distance. Man, Selena, he's so handsome, her friend told her. Are you jealous or what? Selena even hesitated. No way, what jealousy, just happy for my friend. Katie took a little offense. Come on, let's go home, she took her hand, and they walked down the sidewalk. The month went by very quickly, and the girls were away at school again. Mickey asked Selena to move in with him, but she refused. She was comfortable in the dormitory. Maybe it was fear of the young man's parents or something else that was stopping her. What if you and I got married? Mickey said. Well, when we get married, then we'll see. She wasn't going to do anything yet, no big moves. On New Year's Eve, the girl wanted to go home. She knew Kathy would come too. But Mickey said that Katie should come to their place and Selena should stay here. Selena didn't know whether to agree to that or not, but when she called her friend, she talked her into it, just as she had talked Mickey into it. The guy's house was packed with all the company, and his parents were there too. And after the chimes, he put a box in front of Selena. What is it? She looked at him with frightened eyes. "Selena, marry me," he told her with a huff. "Mickey, I knew you would do that. But it's still early. We're only in our second year. There's still so much studying to do. Why rush?" She couldn't understand. "So what would your answer be?" He seemed to miss everything she had just said. "Of course I agree, but I think it's very early." She stood up to him. "Oh kids, I congratulate you." Mom got up from her seat and hugged them both. Katie was happy for her friend too. Selena still insisted on having the wedding in the summer when school was over. Mickey agreed to wait. And so, the next session was over. Selena came back to her place. Kathy was waiting for her at the entrance. "So, friend, when's the wedding?" she asked. "In 3 weeks, as if you didn't know." "Yeah, of course I know. It's just good to see you." They hugged. After that, the hassle began, which was very enjoyable for both girls. Dress, veil, shoes, everything was there. But then the argument began over where the wedding event would be held. Mickey insisted that everything was in his city because he had friends and acquaintances there, and not only him, but also his parents. Selena, on the other hand, said that she wanted to do it in her town, where all her family and friends were. Eventually, the young man relented. Selena was glad that he did. Waiting for the wedding and preparing for it lasted so long, and the wedding itself flew by in an instant. No one even noticed what it was. "I hope we'll live in that town," her husband asked her after the wedding. "Of course we study there," she laughed. "Should we get an apartment or go to your parents' house?" Of course, if money allowed, could rent an apartment. Selena was afraid to talk about it because she thought the guy would think she was mercantile. "First we'll live at my place, and then we'll find an apartment," he concluded. Good, Selena agreed. She had more worries now. Not only did she have to go to school, but she had to do everything at home to please her mother-in-law. At some points, the girl just wanted to lie down and lie down. She was getting very tired. "You're lying down again," her mother-in-law told her, even though Selena had just laid down after scrubbing the entire apartment. In general, the woman had a nose for it. As soon as her daughter-in-law sat down or dozed off, she was right there. That's it, I'm getting up," the girl reluctantly said, got up, and went to do her business. After the 3rd year, there was an internship. Selena decided to do it in the same city where she and her husband lived, although it was easier to get a job in her hometown. But as Mickey had said, that was the way to do it. "Aren't you coming over?" Katie called her. "Probably not. I'll do everything here." Selena regretted it too, but there was nothing left to do. "Then I'll visit you for another day," Katie said firmly. "Okay, we'll be waiting," the girls said goodbye. Life went on as usual. All the practices and sessions were over. Selena had to go to work. She was a graduate. Katie had 1 more year to go. "Can I go to my mom's house and meet Kathy there?" "That Kathy, some flighty, bad influence on you," Mickey said and wrinkled his forehead. "Please," she begged him. "Okay," he agreed. They never rented an apartment. They still lived with her husband's parents. It couldn't help but get on her nerves. When her mother-in-law realized that they were staying here for a long time, she began to torment Selena. "Hi, it's been so long since I've seen you." Katie pulled her friend close to her. "And don't tell me, you know how tired I am." Selena took a seat on the bench. "Husband," my friend guessed, and he too. They were sitting right there at the train station talking. "Okay, let's go. You can tell me about it later." Katie stood up and pulled Selena with her. The conversation didn't stop on the way. There was so much news that they couldn't wait to share. They both laughed as they visited Selena's parents first, and then went to Katie's house. "Selena, you just don't look surprised," Katie warned her. "You and your secrets again. You've been like this all your life." The girls used to it. They entered the apartment where Katie's parents were waiting. A young man greeted them on the doorstep. "Hello," he greeted the guest gullibly. "I'm Carlo." Selene, she stood looking at him. Yes, that's my fiancé. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of jinxing it. Katie bloomed with happiness. You motherfucker. My friend knew this was to be expected of her. They all made their way to the kitchen. There was talk of the wedding. Now Selena was going to help her friend in this endeavor. He'd stayed in this city a few days longer than she'd promised her husband. Why? Mickey asked into the phone. Katie's wedding is coming up. We need to help. She knew he'd start making up different versions again. Or did you get a boyfriend over there? Mickey was very jealous. What are you talking about? If you want, you can come yourself. Extra hands will not hurt, she'd offered him. You know I'm working. He didn't listen to his wife's excuses anymore. Hung up the phone. Well, my friend was standing next to me. As usual, nothing new. The girl didn't want to talk about it. Okay, don't feel bad. He's not going to kill you, Katie hugged her. After that, there was no time to think about Mickey, and everything spun and spun. The wedding day was set and the young people were ready. I'll go home, talk Mickey into it, and we'll come over, Selena promised at the train station. Okay, we'll wait to see how I am without a witness. They hugged again. Selena was walking up to the house. She wasn't expecting what was going to happen next. She's here, her mother shouted from the hallway as she opened the door for her daughter-in-law. Did you have a good time? Mickey's out of the room. And I told you there's a reason she goes there every time, her mother coaxed. Come on, first of all, my parents are there. Second of all, my best friend's getting married. Selena didn't even get to take her shoes off. And third, lover boy, mother-in-law never left their side. Mickey, I didn't expect that from you. She finally took off her shoes and went into the room. If you go to the wedding, divorce right away, her husband told her. Then the divorce, she wasn't going to ditch Katie. There, see how quickly you agreed. And you said you had no one there. He jumped up from the couch. I don't have anyone there. Selene was already so sick of it all that she wasn't even looking for excuses. Why don't you call me with you? The husband continued. Before I could, you swooped in from the doorstep. She turned to him. Okay, I'll go. He sat back down. No one minded, Selena smiled. When the husband and wife were getting ready, the mother-in-law was so furious that her son did not listen to her. She talked about how her daughter-in-law had no shame or conscience, but no one paid attention to her words, which made the woman even angrier. I thought you weren't coming, but Katie was home doing her bridal makeup. If you knew what it was like back home, Selena didn't even want to remember it. Okay, I came with you. Her girlfriend looked at her through the mirror. At the registry office, everything was fine. Mickey stood by and didn't say a word. But at the restaurant, it started. A young man came up to Selena and asked her to dance. Mickey watched silently as his wife went with him. But as soon as she got to her seat, it started. Is that him? The husband asked. Who? She turned her head toward him. Then she realized and shook her head negatively. I see. So, with me you do not dance. And with anyone? Went, indignant young man. Did you invite them? They'd start fighting. After that, Mickey didn't speak to her all evening. When we got to my mother-in-law's house, he made a scene there too. You know, Mom didn't know we had anything wrong with our relationship at all. She told him reproachfully. He knows now, he said with defiance. Do you often do this? The woman asked her daughter in the kitchen. Lately, constantly, Selene didn't want to talk about it. It's going to get worse from here, Mom said from the height of her experience. Okay, we'll figure it out somehow. Selena was already thinking about it herself. After all this, they returned home. Selena was offered a position at the school, which she didn't refuse, because it was impossible to stay at home. She and Katie began to call each other more often. In the last year of her studies, her friend worked part-time at the hospital, where she had an internship, and then was going to settle there for a long time. In Selena's family, after she went to work, there were scandals every day. And her skirt is short, and she wears bright makeup. Do you do all this to make men pay attention to you? Her husband asked her at home. What are you talking about? A knee-length skirt is not a mini, she showed him. But it's all tight, he parried. What should I wear, a burqa? She covered half her face and left only her eyes. Yes, he nodded, or better yet, stay home altogether. And listen to your nonsense. She went into the kitchen, but there was a new ambush. Why didn't you mop the floors today? Her mother-in-law asked. What floors? I was at work. I just got here. She wanted to come out of the kitchen. No, honey, you're not going anywhere until you talk to me. The mother-in-law closed the aisle. What do you all want from me? She was so tired. She was ready to go anywhere. To make you obedient. Not as you are now, the woman explained. What obedient? Am I a dog or a trained monkey? Selena couldn't help herself. No one said that, you said it yourself, smiled the mother-in-law. The girl pushed her away and went to the room where she and her husband lived. That's it, I can't do this anymore. She threw her things into her suitcase. Where are you going? Her husband looked surprised. Away from your family, as if sung together to drive me. She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. Don't go. He almost got on his knees. Stand back. Don't grovel. She stepped around him. Selena, Mickey looked at his mother. Let her go. She'll come crawling back later, the woman said arrogantly. The girl couldn't stand it anymore. She left the apartment and went to her colleague, whom she had befriended not so long ago. She knew that she wouldn't say no. Nancy, hi. She said hello to her as she opened the doors. Come in. What's wrong? The woman saw Selena come in with a large bag. Can I stay with you for a while? Then I'll tell you all about it, the guest asked. Sure enough, she took the bag from the girl's hands and carried it into the room. I'll settle things with work and the divorce now, and then I'll think about what to do, Selena said. Will you leave the collective? Nancy asked. I guess so. I can't be in the same city as Mickey, she said sadly. It's a pity to lose such a specialist. You are young, but you can do a lot of things. The woman shook her head. They sat in the kitchen for a long time, discussing the situation that had happened at Selena's. After that, they went to bed. Both of them had to go to work in the morning. Nancy asked me when she was ready to leave. She always got to school an hour early to get everything ready. Yes, I'll be right back. Just a few more minutes, the one said. The two of them came to the school. Selena decided not to procrastinate and to go to the principal at once. She explained everything. She asked her to finish the school year, and then she would let her go. Selena went to the meeting. Nancy said she could stay with her for that time. Mickey was looking for meetings, but Selena wouldn't agree to them. She was afraid of the fact that she would feel sorry for him. She had put a stop to it a long time ago, and she didn't want anything back. You're so resilient, Nancy told her. If you lived in that family, you wouldn't be like this, she laughed back. She filed divorce papers, with only a year to go until the end of the year. After that, Selena was thinking of traveling to the city where she was born. Don't forget, they were saying goodbye to Nancy. Of course, she left her address and phone number with her. It was a shame to say goodbye to the staff. They were all so friendly, but it had to be done. Selena drove home. Daughter, how did you decide to do that? On what exactly? I don't understand. For everything, divorce, come back. The woman was glad to have her daughter back together with her. I don't know, but it had to be done at some point. Selena didn't want to bring it up. Are you going to get a job? My mother asked. Of course, Celine looked up at her. Not sitting on your neck. Okay. Do you want me to call Sarah? The woman wanted to help her daughter. No, I want to do it myself. I've done it before, she denied it. Good. The mother was glad to have such a mature, sensible, and independent daughter. As she planned, so she did. The very next day, Celine was already sitting in the principal's office. Sarah, I wish I could work at your school, Selena told her. Of course, I'd love to take you, but not now. All the seats are taken so far, the woman regretted. Okay, I'll wait. As soon as something becomes available, call me immediately. She wrote a phone number on a piece of paper. After that, the girl went home. There was nothing to do at all. Katie didn't come for the summer this time. She went straight to work after she got her diploma. Selena was envious that her friend was doing so well, married well, and found a job right away. But she tried not to think about it. 6 months passed. Nobody called from the school. The money Selena had was long gone, and she wondered what to do. Selena, there's a phone call for you. Her mother put her on the phone. Hello, she approached. Selena, hi, it's Harvey, your classmate, remember? A male voice gibbered in the receiver. I remember not parts of it, she grumbled. I found out that you came to our city. I have John, my son. He is going to the 1st grade today, cannot study. Again quickly spoke the young man. Is it that bad? She thought, wow, he was the most inconspicuous kid in his class, and he's got a kid going to school. No, we just want to be safe, he said with a pleading tone in his voice. Good, she thought. Why didn't she think of that before? Not for free, of course, but how much? He continued with his quick story. Oh, I don't even know. Bring as much as you think you need, and I'll find out later and tell you. She thought it was the first time she was doing it. Maybe it wouldn't work out yet. From that date on, children began to enroll with her. Of course, she couldn't take many, but she had a few regulars. And why go out to school when you can earn money at home too? Her mother praised her in the evening. I'm so tired. Selena sat eating soup. From the children? The mother guessed. No, the loneliness, the work, all of it. It's just so monotonous, she sighed. Call Kathy, go visit. See how things are going, the woman advised. Indeed, Selena had forgotten all about her friend because of her work. And she was good. She had only called a couple of times in a year. Maybe she has her own business and problems there since she doesn't call or come over. Selena thought calling or not calling. No one is going to hit you over the head. Just call, and that's it, the woman insisted. She herself saw that it was time for her daughter to rest. Okay, it's late now, and tomorrow I'll be sure to get a girlfriend. If I'm lucky, I'll get a little vacation. She spoke her thoughts aloud. That was fine. Her mom was glad she'd pointed her in the right direction. Kathy, it's been so long since I've heard from you. She called the next day to a friend. Selena, hello, how many years? How many winters? Rejoiced her friend at the call. You know, I wanted to come to your place. What do you think about it? Of course. What are you asking? You and I are like sisters, agreed to Taz's proposal. It's settled then, wait. I'll be there the other day. Selena didn't want to discuss anything over the phone. She knew they would talk about everything when they met. For a few more days, the girl accepted students who went to her. After that, she announced that she was going on vacation and cancelled all classes. She packed her bag. A day later, a train was waiting for her, which would take her to her favorite friend. And I've been waiting. Katie opened the door. Hello, they hugged. While Selena was dealing with her problems with her husband and her job, there were a lot of changes in Katie's life too. She got a job, just like she said her husband loved. He got a good job too. I see you have a full house, Selena said as she walked in and saw how her friends lived. Yeah, Carlo, you know how Carlo is. He does everything for me, not bragging, just saying girlfriend. Yeah, you're lucky. How was your evening? She asked her husband. You have a great friend, he hugged his wife. I know that. Kathy was glad it was going so well. She went to her room and lay down as well, needing some sleep after a night on duty. It wasn't until Carlo came in for lunch that both girls woke up. Wow, Selena looked at her watch. You can sleep. Carlo laughed at her. It's been a long time since I've gotten this much sleep, she stretched. When the man left, the girlfriends got ready to go for a walk. Your husband said he was going to introduce me to some friend this weekend, Selena told her friend. Probably with Albert, she guessed. How do you know? Did they talk about it? Selena thought it was all Katie's idea. And how could I not know my husband's friends? They are my friends too. She didn't elaborate. Confess your idea, laughed Selene. Why should you sit alone? You'll be in front of the man. He's a very nice guy. Kathy began to praise him. Then why did you split up? Selena wondered. Don't talk to him about it. It's a very bad story. His wife was going out left and right. Almost everyone knew except him. Once, at a corporate party, she was alone. He didn't go with her. And when it was too late, he decided to do a good deed, to meet her. He came, and she was right on the street kissing her colleague. After that, they got into the car and drove away. That day, she came home only in the morning. He could not forgive and left. The friend told the story. Wow, there were no children? Selene clarified. No, Katie's gotten sad for some reason. Well, enough about sad things. Come on, show me what you have here and how. The girl translated the topic. All day long they went shopping, did some shopping, and then sat in a cafe. They felt like they had that time back again. When they were still enrolled in this city, it was so heartwarming and fun. So home, Katie got up from her seat. I'm not embarrassing you. For some reason, Selena thought of it just now. What are you saying? You'll get to know Albert. Move in with him. He has his own huge apartment, and there's not enough mistresses there. They walked towards the house. Actually, I came to you for a few days, and you already put me in a man, laughed the girl. We'll get you a job here too. Katie was sure of it. At home, it was the same as yesterday after Carlo came in. Happy talk at the table, and after that bedtime. Saturday came, Carlo as promised, told his wife and Selena to get ready, and he would go to the store and buy everything they needed. Gold, not a man. Selene glared at him. Spit or you'll jinx it, her friend muttered to her. Everything was ready, and they drove off. Carlo had a small house, which they considered their summer house. The view here was fabulous. Selena heard a car making a noise. She turned. It was indeed coming towards them. Here comes Albert. Carlo came out to meet him. Hello everyone. A tall brunette came out of the salon. He took one look at Selena, and she was gone. Come on, I'll introduce you to Katie's friend. Carlo led him to her. Please love and welcome my friend Albert. He introduced him to the girl. Selene, she blushed. Don't be so embarrassed or I'll start doing it myself, he said cheerfully. Good, she said. All together they entered the courtyard, the men going straight to the brazier while the women busied themselves with the table. So, how did you like him? My friend was curious. Pretty, she didn't mince words. You bet he is. Look at him. What he looks like. That's his personality, Kathy told me. Oh, you think we're gonna make it? Selena wasn't so sure. Albert was really handsome. He was afraid to start a new relationship because he thought he would be treated the same way again as the first time. So, buddy, how'd you like the girl? Carlo was threading meat on a skewer. Yes, she's pretty, cheerful, and modest, he said knowingly. Shall we take it? The comrade joked. We'll see. Albert didn't promise anything. No need to be afraid. Things weren't working out so easily in her life either, Carlo said quietly. I understand, nodded the friend. They were roasting meat that spread its aroma throughout the village. Well, here's to you ladies. Albert raised his glass. And we're rooting for you, the girlfriend said cheerfully. Selene, let's go talk. He offered her his hand. Let's go. She looked at her girlfriend, who winked at her. They went to the swing set, which was right there on the grounds. They were both silent as they walked. Did you come here? He saw her sitting on the swing, walk over to swing a little. Yeah, I hadn't seen Katie in a while, so I thought I'd meet up. Selena liked it here. How long have you two known each other? Albert wanted to know everything about her. Since first grade, once they sat at the same desk, they had never parted again. Selena smiled. He had already rocked her enough. Carlo and I went to school together too, the young man admitted. You're interesting. Selena didn't know why she said that herself. We'll meet again. Won't you go away? He was curious. Yeah, I'll be staying at Katie's for a while longer. Selena looked in their direction. Carlo said you wanted to get a job here. Albert wondered. They're the ones who want me to stay here. She hadn't had time to think about it yet. And you? He stopped the swing. If only with you. She didn't realize how she'd said those words out loud, just thinking about it. Perhaps the wine was playing tricks on her. Albert froze. He couldn't find anything to answer. He just stood there looking at her. I'm sorry, she's on her feet. No, nothing. Still his stupor hasn't passed. Selena went back to her friends. Now she was cursing herself for her language. Maybe Albert would think she was imposing and wouldn't want to talk to her anymore. What happened? Wondered the friends as they saw that the young man had remained standing there by the swing and Celine had come back. I'm such a fool. Almost crying, the girl said. Explain normally what happened. Did you have a fight? Katie couldn't understand. Nothing happened. Everything is fine. Albert walked over to them and put his hand on Celine's shoulder. She froze and stood like that for a few minutes. Nothing more happened that evening. They talked for a long time. Then Albert and Carlo went to put out the brazier, and Kathy and Selena cleaned up the dirty dishes. And yet, what did you get out of it? Her friend looked at Selena. I'll tell you later, she promised. We didn't get home until the next morning. Albert said goodbye and promised to call. Oh, Selena, if this works out, the girlfriend spoke dreamily. The next day, when all her friends were at work, Selena decided to go to the school to find out about vacancies. And to her surprise, they were there. The principal said she could hire her as soon as possible. Katie, and I got a job, said a happy Selena in the evening. No kidding, was happy for her friend. Selena, Carlo called her on the phone. It was Albert. They talked for a good half hour. After that, Selena came into the kitchen all red. What are you? Like a cancer? Katie thought they were fighting again. He asked me out on a date. Selena was excited. Everything was going around inside. So that's great news. Katie led her to her room. Get changed. Stop walking around in jeans and sneakers already. The girl put on the dress her friend gave her, shoes, some makeup on her face. She was ready. So that's how ugly ducklings become beautiful swans. Carlo met them in the hallway. What are you talking about? His wife shushed him. I'm sorry, you were already beautiful and now you're glowing. He complimented Selena. She hailed a cab and drove to the restaurant, where Albert was already waiting for her. When she got there, his expression was about the same as Carlo's. Wow, that dress looks great on you. He took her hand and walked her to the table. No need to embarrass me. That, believe me, is enough. She was all red again. Why are you so embarrassed? He looked at her, that blush only adding beauty to the girl's appearance. I don't know, she shrugged. Okay, let's order. He held out the menu to her. Selena had chosen a light salad and meat for the hot meal. Albert had ordered something for himself and some champagne. Selena, after we met, I thought you could stay with me. I realized that you live with Carlo and Kathy. They have a family. You may be redundant, but they will never tell you that. I suggest you move in with me. We'll get to know each other, be close for a while, and then we'll decide if we should start something or not, he said in a businesslike tone that made Selena laugh. I don't even know. No one's ever offered her that before. Think. He poured champagne into glasses. Okay, I need to consult with Katie, best friend after all. She didn't mince words. Okay, now, let's have a nice evening. He sat across from her and kept looking at her. They danced. Selena could smell his perfume. She didn't know why, but it turned her head. Afterwards, Albert walked her home. Remember what you need to think about, he shouted after her. Good, she turned and sent him an air kiss. He pretended to catch it and tucked it into his breast pocket. "Oh, Kathy, I like him so much, but I'm afraid to hurry in case he thinks something," she told her friend back home. What would he think if he offered? She didn't understand. "Well, then I agree. You cannot miss this option." And suddenly, in a joint residence, "I do not like it too," Selena decided. "Look how well everything is going. She found a job, met a man. Now just wait for the wedding. And that's it. Everyone is happy," rejoiced Katie. Selena moved in with Albert. He waited for her, prepared a room. The first day, it was kind of awkward. Selena was embarrassed of him. He must have been embarrassed of her. Going for an interview tomorrow, she told him in the evening. "Well done. Break a leg," he rejoiced. "To hell with it," she laughed. After that, he suggested watching a movie. Selena didn't mind that. It was good for the two of them, but it was only the first day. In the morning, she went to school. As promised by the principal, she was accepted there. Everything was going well. Not a couple of days later, Selena was in a new team. "How was work?" asked every evening Albert. He was very attentive. In a few weeks of living with him, the girl realized it. "Very well, as long as I like everything," she replied. "We should get together with Carlo and Kathy sometime," the man suggested. I was thinking the same thing. She was no longer blushing in his presence. The couples called each other over the weekend, arranging to meet at the same place where they had been when Albert and Selena met. "How are you guys doing?" my friend started asking around. "Everything's fine." Celine looked at Albert, looking to him for support. "Yes," he nodded. "You two aren't together yet?" Carlo hurried things along. "Wait, it's still early." Selena started to feel uneasy. After that question, it was never spoken of again. That evening, Albert spent more time with his friend. They were arguing about something, talking. It was good, because the girlfriends also needed to socialize. "Katie, when are you going to make the kids happy?" Selena asked. "Date," she gestured for her to stop. "Why?" My friend didn't understand. "Just," replied Katie sadly. "Carlo doesn't want to," the girl guessed. "No, it's more complicated than that." You could see she was having trouble broaching the subject. "Okay, you can tell me yourself when you want to," her friend hugged her. "We had to get back. Everyone had things to do in the morning." Selena washed her face, said goodnight to Albert, and went to her room. She made the bed and lay down. A few minutes later, there was a quiet knock on the door. It opened and Albert appeared. "May I?" he asked. "Yeah, come in. What's wrong?" She sat up in bed. "No, I just want to spend this night with you." He crouched on the edge of the bed. Wow, Selena had expected anything but this. He had brought a blanket with him, in case she minded sleeping under one. Lay down on the other side of the bed. Why today? She didn't know where to start the conversation, or if it was even necessary. "I realized you're the one I need. I think you've figured it out by now too." He saw the way she was looking at him. "Yes," she said quietly. They lay there like two schoolboys, neither one daring to be the first to do anything. "Selena," he moved closer to her, "I really like you." "And you to me," she felt him hug her. After that, their lips came together in a kiss. It was their first real kiss, which they would remember for a long time. In the morning, Albert got up early to prepare breakfast for his beloved. Usually she did it, but today he wanted to make her happy. "Hey, that smells good." She came out into the kitchen. "Good morning here. Thought I'd make breakfast for you." He stood at the stove. Selena walked up to him and hugged him from behind. "Thank you," she kissed his back. "Aren't you late?" He looked at his watch. "No, I have another whole hour." She sat down on a chair and watched Albert put scrambled eggs on the plates. After breakfast, she quickly washed her face, got ready, and went to work. Albert did the same. He was so happy today that it could be felt physically. "See you tonight, love," he kissed her. "Have a good day," she went. Selena couldn't help herself, and already at recess, she called Katie and told her everything that had happened to her last night. Honey, I congratulate you, she told her. Kathy really was happy for her friend. And things were only getting better from there. Albert treated his beloved beautifully, and she reciprocated him. Listen, Selena, I think yours is going to propose to you, Katie said into the phone. What makes you think that? Selena and Albert had been together for a year, but there was never even a hint of it. Yesterday, I heard Carlo talking to him. He thought I was in the bathroom and couldn't hear, my friend explained. And what were they saying there? Selena got worried. Something about a restaurant and a ring. I'm telling you, it's a proposal. Katie couldn't keep it from her friend. Okay, I hear you. Cheeks turning red with joy. Albert was calm until the weekend. They had business as usual. I want to take you out to a restaurant tonight. Carlo and Kathy will be there too, he told her Saturday morning. Okay, I'll be ready. She was calm. She couldn't concentrate on anything at work. Good thing there weren't many classes. She got home early, so there was plenty of time to get ready. Selena tried on all the dresses she had in her closet, but either because of excitement or something else, none of them seemed to fit her. Finally, she chose the one she was going to wear, put it on, arranged her hair, and waited. Albert arrived without delay. The girl got into the car. Let's go. For some reason, Selena began to shake. It was the effect of excitement. Her palms were so cold that it seemed that if she baked something now, she would immediately freeze. How was your day? Albert asked her. Great, she said. You're acting kind of weird. He noticed that she was all clenched up and looking only forward. No, as usual. She tried to speak calmly. Okay. He put his hand on her arm, felt it was icy, but didn't say anything. They pulled up, got out of the car. Carlo and Kathy were already waiting for them. What an event. We might as well have sat at the cottage, Kathy said. Let's go. Not everyone goes to the countryside. We need to have a good rest, Albert called out to everyone. Now it was obvious that he was a little worried himself. The evening went as usual. Everything was already ordered, so the waiter only brought the dishes. At some point, they'd brought champagne. Before that, they had been drinking wine. Friends, I have a confession to make, Albert said. He stood up. In what way? Smiled Carlo. I fell very much in love with this woman, and I wanted her to be my wife, he said and handed Selena the ring. God, Albert, I love you so much. Finally, all excitement gone, she kissed him and put the ring on his finger. Congratulations, Carlo and Kathy said in a voice. Selena drove home happy. She looked at her husband-to-be and couldn't believe that this was even possible. Are you happy? He turned to her. Very much so. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Me too, he petted her. The next day, Selena called her mother, told her everything, and she promised to come. Albert suggested not to make a big celebration, to sign in the registry office and then go to the countryside with friends. Selena was not against it. Mom arrived. Carlo, Katie and a few other people were invited to the wedding. Everyone was happy for the bride and groom, and they looked at each other and were so happy. Well, that's it. Everyone's on board now, Kathy said as she raised a toast. Thank you. Selena walked over and hugged her and Carlo. Yes, friend, I will never forget that. Albert shook hands with his comrade. Life went on. Selena wanted to get pregnant, but it wasn't happening. She went to her friend's house in the evening to talk to her, because she was very close to the subject. You see, Katie, no matter how hard we try, it doesn't work, Selena told her. She spoke again in the quiet voice she'd used before when the subject came up. Will you just tell me? Selena knew that something was going on in the family of friends, but Katie kept quiet about it. Good, she looked straight into her friend's eyes. Well, she waited. When we got married, we were over the moon. This was the family. All that was missing was a baby's cry. But after a year, and then another, and still nothing worked, Katie was silent. Well, not all at once. Selena realized her friend was facing the same problem she was now. I suggested to Carlo that he should undergo a checkup. It was good that he didn't need to go anywhere. He could do it at our hospital, and he agreed. After we went to the doctor, it became known that Carlo would never be able to have children, she cried. Will you calm down? Celine hugged her. I understand and accept it all, but I can't get over it, she said through her tears. You can take an infant. I can't believe you don't have anyone there refusing, Selena suggested. Carlo doesn't want to. He was very upset after that examination too. That's another matter. She realized why her friend was in so much pain. Now you know everything. Kathy couldn't stop crying. Should we go through too? The girl asked her friend. Of course, it's not forbidden to anyone, said the one. That same evening, Selena talked to her husband. He agreed to do it. And a week later, they had all the forms in hand, only to go through the doctors. When everything was done, all that was left was to wait for the results. Are you worried? Albert asked his wife. Briefly, they sat in the hallway outside the doctor's office. When he called out to them, Selena's legs became cotton. She felt like she couldn't walk at all. But her husband was there to help. Yes, indeed, you have some problems, the doctor said and wrote something down. You mean we're not having kids? Selena almost fainted. Why, there is a solution to that problem, the doctor told her. What was it? She was all ears. IVF, he told her in just 3 letters. We agree, while thinking, Selena, said Albert. You need to prepare, read all about it, then take all the tests again and come to the laboratory, said the medic with knowledge. We'll get it done. The husband took his wife's hand and they went home. How can it be, 2 friends, and both of them having such problems, Selena lamented. And what don't you like with what the doctor suggested to us? Even if it won't be the natural way, but still the same, Albert said. Yeah, I agree with you. She's thought about it before. In the evening, Carlo and Katie came to visit them. There were no more secrets on either side. When do you all start? Asked Selena's friend. The sooner the better, she said. Great, and I'll be your personal doctor, Katie smiled. Selena felt like she was jealous. Okay, agreed the girlfriend. What Albert and Selena had to go through. But lo and behold, the procedure had taken place. Now it needed time, whether it would take root or not. How are you feeling? Katie kept calling and asking. It's okay. Her friend answered her for the 100th time. Great, no exercise, no intimacy with my husband or anything else, commanded by my personal physician. I obey, laughed Selena into the phone. 2 weeks passed. Selena started to feel her breasts hurting. She called her friend to ask. Honey, I congratulate you. That tells me it worked out, Kathy practically shouted into the phone. Okay, then I'll make an appointment for a checkup, she mumbled. Everything was going well. Kathy counseled every day, and she also took her to her first ultrasound. The woman who conducted it was surprised when 3 other people walked into the office besides her colleague. They were Selena, Carlo, and Albert. All on the ultrasound. She laughed. Yes, Caroline, you've already forgiven us, stepped closer to her Katie. Okay, she rubbed Selena's belly. Congratulations, you have not just one fetus, but a whole. Why did you stop talking? Startled Celine. I don't know, it looks like 2. But what's this? She turned the device a little sideways. So how long? Albert couldn't wait. So far, I say 2, nodded Caroline affirmatively. Great, we were afraid there might be more, Albert smiled. He helped his wife up. Everyone went home in high spirits. We sat there for a while and parted ways. Selena was happy. It was hard for her to go to school, to do her lessons, but she did it. Would you quit your job already? Her husband asked her. You what? I like it, she resisted. Look at the watermelon you're carrying on your back, he laughed, and right afterward, he came over and kissed her belly. She knew he was joking, so she never took offense. When she had to go on maternity leave, she couldn't take it anymore. She spent almost all her time in bed. Albert supported her as best he could. One evening, he got a call from work, saying that he needed to come there urgently. "I won't be long, I promise." He leaned over and kissed his wife. She hadn't been feeling well since this morning. "Please don't go," she held his hand. "I can't." He realized he couldn't leave his wife either, but at the same time, a fixed-term contract. He put on his coat and left the house. He decided that as long as he started the car and stood in traffic, it would be long, it would be faster to walk. He ran to the road. It was a long way to the crosswalk. He decided he would just cross. He just ran out onto the road. A car came out of nowhere, brakes squealing, darkness. "Selena," I called an ambulance, rushed her to the hospital. Katie came to see her. "What's wrong?" "I feel better now. I have to wait for Albert," perplexed her friend. "Get up, grab what you need, let's go," as if her friend hadn't heard her. Selena obeyed her. She was in charge of her pregnancy after all. She put on the dress. Katie helped with her shoes, and they walked out of the entrance. They were at the hospital in a few minutes. "Look, friend, you just don't worry too much, or it might start early." Katie took her hand. "What happened? Why is everyone running around me?" "It's still early. I'm feeling fine. Just my blood pressure is spiking a bit." Selena looked at the doctors who were here. "Albert." Kathy fell silent. She just couldn't say it out loud. "What's wrong with him?" My heart thumped in my chest. He'd been hit by a car. Carlo had gotten the call an hour ago. Her friend muttered in a trembling voice. "Where is he? How is he feeling?" Selena wanted to get up, but at that moment a strong tingle tugged at her lower abdomen. "Please don't worry. He's in ICU, alive." "But what exactly? Will be known later," muttered Katie. But it was too late. Selena had lost consciousness. She was hooked up to all the instruments that were needed. "C-section," shouted Katie already as a doctor. The preparations for the operation had begun, and everyone was fussing. Katie realized that her friend would not be able to give birth easily. She lay there, waking up and then losing consciousness again. "Anesthesia," the command sounded. The anesthesiologist inserted the needle into her back, and Selena, though she was almost unconscious, felt her legs give out. She was laid on the table, an IV in one hand, a machine in the other that took her blood pressure. Katie assisted, and the operation began. Selena couldn't see anything. She was as dizzy as before and sometimes foggy. "What's wrong with my husband?" She whispered with parched lips. "It's going to be okay." Kathy was doing her job. "That's it. You have two wonderful boys," she told her, but her friend was so exhausted from the whole thing that she didn't understand much. Since the babies were premature, they were immediately placed in special boxes. Selena was taken to the intensive care unit to recover a little. "Katie," Selena called out, but no one answered her. A few minutes later, a nurse came over. "What did you want?" She looked at the girl on the bed, who was pale. "Get Katie, where is she?" Selena thought she was shouting, but she was actually speaking very softly. "She'll be here shortly. Check the IV," and the girl left. In the morning, Selena was moved to a regular room. She still couldn't recover from the shock. "Hi, honey." Katie came into the room. "Where have you been?" Selena was already coming to her senses. "Don't worry, everything is fine. Carlo is with Albert." She held her friend's hand. "What's wrong with him?" Tears came out of his eyes. "He's in a coma, but the doctors say he's going to be fine." Katie tried to reassure her. "How did this happen? And where are my children?" Selena turned her head. They weren't in the room. "They are in a special room. When you feel better, I'll take you there." Katie spoke quickly. "Are they all right?" cried the girl. "Yes, they'll be fine," her friend assured her, like a doctor. The next day, Selena got up. She went straight to them. For a long time, she stood looking at her two sons. "Billy and Barry," she said aloud. "Are you naming names?" Katie came up behind me. "Yes, look how tiny they are." The newly mommy drove her finger along the glass. Everything will be fine. Don't worry. Her friend took her hand and led her somewhere. Where are we going? Celine worried. To Albert's. Don't you want to go? Katie stopped. Do you want him to come to his senses? The wife hoped so. No. But I guess if he hears your voice, he'll feel better, the woman speculated. They got to the floor above, and Selena saw her husband. He was covered in plaster and bandages. She came over and took his hand. Congratulations, you've become a daddy, she cried. He can hear everything, Carlo whispered in his ear. He's been here all this time. Sometimes Katie took over, but she had to work and rest. I know, Selena said through tears. She went back to her room, called her mother, told her about everything, and she came to see her the next day. A few weeks passed. Albert came out of the coma. Kathy said that soon the children could be moved to a normal environment. They had grown up and could now do everything like full-grown children. Albert, his wife, came to see him. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you then. He couldn't make himself intelligible, but she understood him. It's going to be okay, she kissed him. And so, after a long time, Selena, her mom, and 2 wonderful babies were home. So, we need to get everything ready here. The woman looked at the room the parents had allocated to the children. The crib had been bought, everything else too. Albert had to do it all while his wife was in the hospital. But as it happened, they had to do everything themselves. Selena was very grateful to her mother and friends for helping everyone. One day, she was sleeping and had a dream, and in it, she and her 3 children. Then she wondered why there were 3, because she had given birth to 2. In the morning, Selena told her mom, "It's just a dream," the woman told her. But Selena began to remember that during the surgery, 3 times, it felt like her skin was being stretched. The first time, there was a baby. The second time, there was a baby. But after the 3rd time, there was nothing and no one. That's what she told her mother. "Daughter, Kathy told me you were out of your mind," the woman smiled. "So what? I remember all that." Celine squinted her eyes. "Probably Kathy would have told you about it," Mother suggested. "Katie, her husband, has been diagnosed as infertile," snarked her mother. "And what? You think she took the baby from you?" I realized what my daughter was thinking. "Why not?" Selena was being paranoid. "So, look, it's all in your head. And where do you think he is now?" Mom wanted to reassure her. Hidden away, there was speculation again. "Don't talk nonsense. There's so much to do. Albert will be discharged soon, and he needs care." The mother continued with her chores. "Hi, how are my puffins doing?" "Katie's here to visit them." Selena knew Carlo was in the hospital, and if Katie was here too, where was the baby? She shook her head to make the silly thoughts go away. All together they drove this evening. The boys were so pretty. Albert had been released from the hospital. Carlo had brought him home. He was no longer the cheerful man he'd been before the accident. The base of his skull was fractured, as well as his hip joint. He had to be taught to walk again. "Thank you for not leaving us," Celine hugged her husband. "I'm sorry." They put him on the bed. Now it was as if there was a 3rd child in the house. My mother-in-law and my wife took care of all of them as best they could. The boys were growing up. Albert started to get up slowly, and his wife was always by his side. "Come on, darling, one more step." He walked around the apartment. He tried. He did not want to fall in the mud in front of her. Of course, he got tired quickly, but he did it with all his might. "Selena, bring me the children," he said, and she went straight for the 2 toddlers, who were already crawling around the apartment. "Oh, you're so fast." Dad couldn't handle them. Imagine if it had been 3. Celine seated herself at his side. "What are you talking about? It's not the first time I've heard it. Get it out of your head and bring up Barry and Billy." He looked at each. "You got it all mixed up again," Celine laughed. "Okay, I'll remember soon. He was still very weak." "Selena, I suggest you take Albert to the surgery. He'll feel better immediately afterwards. He'll be able to walk normally," Kathy called her. That's what they did. The wife arranged with a clinic, the price was reasonable, and Albert was taken. When the boys were almost a year and a half old, their father walked around the apartment with a cane. Well, tomboys, he stood his ground. Dad, they ran to him. Soon the kindergarten line would be coming up. We'd have to call Mom again, Selena said. I don't mind. Albert loved his mother-in-law. Selena had to go to work, so she called her mother, who was happy to visit her daughter and son-in-law. It was not a burden for her to take care of her grandchildren. Have you noticed that Carlo and Katie have been coming over less often? Selena asked her husband. Here we go again. Calm down already. We would have found out a long time ago if it was as you say. Albert was losing his temper. I don't know, but I'm sure of what I'm saying. Selena stepped away from him. She watched the mother settle the children and grimaced. She dreamed about having 3 children very often, and after that she woke up in tears. But she never told anyone about it again. Everyone just laughed at her. Were you sick again? Albert kissed her. No, it's okay, she replied to his kiss. The boys went to kindergarten. They liked to run and play there. When they were 3, their grandmother went to her place. After that, they were taken there on long weekends. I'm going to go to work, Albert told his wife one day. Are you sure you can do it? He's walking now, but he's still limping a little. Yeah, he was ready to go into battle. Okay, just please be careful, his wife told him. He left, and she walked him to his car. Selena was working now too, and her sons were big, so she had no trouble getting them in and out of the garden. They dressed on their own, and then spent the whole trip telling their mom all about what they'd been fed and what they'd done. Life took a new turn. At home, the special bed Albert used to sleep on was removed. The cribs were also moved to the closet, and now there was a beautiful bunk bed for the boys. Wondering if there were 3 of them, where the third would sleep, Selene stood looking at the rearrangement of the room. Stop fantasizing, her husband, who heard her thinking out loud, told her. Trust me, it's not a fantasy. A mother always feels. She turned to him. Why don't you talk to Kathy directly? You've been friends for so many years. He told her then. What if it really is my fantasies and the man takes offense? Selena thought to herself. They were less likely to go to the dacha with their friends now, either because they didn't have the time or the opportunity. But today, they just wanted to rest, especially since tomorrow was a day off. Katie, hi, Selena called her girlfriend. And good luck to you, she replied with humor. Now I got a call from the railroad station master saying my son was there. She quit as she told me. I don't understand anything, call your mother, shouted Albert. Selena dialed a number, but her cell phone was out of range and no one answered her home phone. Lord, really? Come quickly, she hurried her husband. They got into the car and drove to the train station. While Albert was parking and getting out of the car, Selena had already run into the building. She was shown the door, she opened it and froze in place. A few minutes later, her husband came in after her. He too was amazed. Hello, brought them out of their stupor by the policeman. I need to talk to you, Selena told him. She looked at her husband, who was still staring at the boy. Okay, let's go outside. He showed her where to go. You understand, this is my son, but not mine. I mean, I didn't raise him. She began to ramble, not knowing how to explain everything to this man. What are you talking nonsense? You decided to get rid of the child, so have the strength to admit it. He did not believe her. Did you call custody? She asked. Yeah, he saw his partner call the authorities. They'll be here now, and we'll ask him ourselves, Selena breathed out. She was pounding so hard, she couldn't do anything. Hey, Albert came up to the guy. Hello, Alex looked at this unfamiliar uncle, but he wasn't scared. Albert couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him sat a boy, who was a carbon copy of his twins. What's your name? He asked. Alex, the guy answered quickly and simply. Alex, Albert repeated after him. When the guardianship came, they couldn't understand a thing. Selena told them some stories about childbirth and skin tension and everything else. "Woman, have you been drinking?" the oldest asked her sternly. "No, I'm telling you," she puffed up her lungs again. "Wait," Albert came over. "Look," he pulled a picture of the children out of his wallet. Then they couldn't understand anything. "So is this your child or not?" they asked again. "Yes, I gave birth to him, but I didn't raise him," Celine said for the 100th time. "Nothing is clear, we're taking the boy, when you've made up your mind. Come and see us." She handed her her card. "Let's go to Kathy's," Selena commanded her husband. A few minutes later, they were already at her friend's apartment. Selena couldn't calm down. She was still feverish. "What's the matter with you?" She opened the door for them. "How many children have I given birth to?" Finally, this question did not come as a shock to either her or her husband. "What are you talking about?" Her friend didn't understand. "Just answer the question. How many children have I given birth to? Name a number," Selena thrust at her. "Let's go to the room," she called them. Albert realized that the conversation would not be short. "Speak up already, or I won't vouch for myself," Celine glared. "Stop yelling already. Yes, you gave birth to 3. But how could you know that?" cried Katie. "How, you're still asking? Did you sell it to someone?" yelled her friend. "Crazy, I would never do that." She got up and went to get water. She took it for herself and hid it somewhere. That's Selena's second theory. "What's wrong with you? I'll tell you all about it now." She took a few sips and poured Celine a drink. "I don't want to. I'm listening to you." She pushed the glass away. "When the labor started, you were very bad. I ordered a C-section, but you remember that yourself. One baby was big, he was fine. The second one was a little smaller, but also normal. But the third one had a triple entanglement. He was almost dead. I didn't even show it to you. Can you imagine what would have happened to you? Your husband had an accident. He was in intensive care, and the baby was dead." Katie was crying the whole time. "And where did you put it? Throw it away?" Selena spoke in a different voice. "No, I gave him to the nurse who was there to take him to the doctor unnoticed. She said that the kid was not alive. One lung had not developed, and he would not live till morning. That's what happened. The same nurse came to me and told me the baby was dead. I asked her to bury him. All I did was keep the secret for so many years. I didn't think it would come out." Katie hugged her friend. "Forgive me, and I've thought all sorts of nasty things about you over the years." Selena felt guilty. "So how did you find out about the baby?" Kathy couldn't understand it. Then Selena and Albert told her everything. "Jesus, did he survive?" Her friend clutched at her heart. "It turns out so." Albert quickly walked over and gave her some water. "Let's go." The woman got to her feet. She couldn't drive herself, so they got into Albert's car. Kathy told him the address. It was outside of town. "And who lives there?" Selena looked out the window to where they were going. "That same nurse. She's been out of work for 3 years now. She was old, retired. It didn't go to my head." They drove up to the old house, which was already leaning to one side, got out, knocked on the window. There was no answer, as it was dark outside. No light could be seen inside. "Who are you here to see?" Grandpa came out of the other half. "To Grandma Lucy's," Katie said. "She's gone, dead since spring." He wiped his eyes. "Who did she live with?" the woman asked then. "With me." You could hear he was having a hard time. "How?" She pointed to the house. "Just like that. With us in one half, and her daughter's no-nonsense daughter in the other. He invited everyone to come in." "What's your name?" Katie asked him. "Archie." He led them to the table. "Did you and Grandma Lucy have a small child?" Katie asked the question cautiously. "Alex, was it?" He answered promptly. "Yes, Alex," jumped up from her seat Selena. "Oh, such a story." He got up and walked over to the stove. Tell me about it, Albert asked him. Betty worked in a maternity hospital. Some woman gave birth there. They gave her a baby, said she wouldn't live till morning. So she came up with an idea to keep her daughter at home, to bring the baby, and told the doctor that he was dead. And the doctor told her to bury him, so she brought him in and he smoked. But he was premature and sickly. Did the doctor really say he wasn't alive? Katie didn't understand. You know what grandfather Ugraph is like. He will raise a dead man from the grave. The old man clenched his fist. I see. Cue it ourselves. Katie looked at Selena. Betty brought it to Julia, but she refused. It wasn't mine. And that's all. They told everyone then that the daughter had fattened it. She was such a girl. She could stay away from home for months, and we took her for fostering. But we didn't keep her safe, and he cried for real. What's wrong? Albert came up to him. I left the house for the woods, and Klavka took the boy and took him somewhere. The neighbors told me. I saw her later in the evening, silent as water in her mouth. He was still wiping his tears. Don't worry, we found your Alex. They started to leave the house. So where is he? The old man held out his hands to them. As soon as we're done, we'll be there. The man turned to him. At home, everyone was sitting around the table. Now Carlo joined them. What to think? We have to go to the guardianship and get the boy. Albert was the first to speak. It's not negotiated at all, but according to the documents, he has a mother, the comrade said. But Alex has it written all over his face. We even have a witness, he remembered his grandfather. I think the doctor who did the exam will say everything too. Won't keep quiet. Katie was sure of it. In the morning, Carlo drew up a statement to the court. The others came to the guardianship office. Alex was so happy about the guests, and it didn't matter that they had only known each other for a few hours. Alex, are you coming to live with us? Selena asked him. Where's my mom? He looked her in the eye. I'm your mom and that odd just stole you from me a few years ago. She tried not to cry. I don't know. He stepped away from Selena and walked over to Albert. And you're my dad? Yeah, he couldn't sit down, so he just leaned into it. I like you, but what if the real one comes? He still couldn't believe what this auntie said. I am the real me. Look, she showed him a portrait of Billy and Barry. Who's that? He was so stunned that the picture fell out of his hands. These are your brothers, and I'm their mom. She hugged him. Claudia was stripped of her parental rights. The doctor and Katie were removed from their positions. Alexander was reinstated on all documents. He was now Selena and Albert's son. Mom, can you bring the boys yourself? Her daughter called her. Of course, and what happened? She began to find out. I'll explain it to you later on the spot, at which point all the courts were just pulling. Grandma entered the apartment with the boys, and all three of them froze in place. Well, who's the crazy one here? She looked at her mother. Daughter, the mother began gulping air with her mouth. Mom quickly gave her some drops. When everyone had calmed down, the boys went to meet their brother and Celine kept telling them what had happened. How could you? You could feel it. The woman lamented. Mother's heart can't be deceived. She hugged her mom. Yes, I thought that such things are only invented in TV shows and movies. But here it is. It happened to us. You could see that my grandmother is still in shock. Let's go, Celine called out to everyone. Where to now? Her mother asked her. Someone I'll introduce you to. Selena smiled enigmatically. They arrived in that very village to Archie's grandfather. He was sitting on the stoop smoking. So, meet your grandfather's grandchildren. Selena got out of the car. I think I had one. He got back on his feet. And now three. The woman laughed, and one by one, Barry, Billy, and Alex began to get out of the car. Whoa, what's mine? He stood there confused. All three of them. No turning away now, still she smiled. After they had visited the village, Selena dialed her friend's number. You're not mad at me? Selena asked that question first. What's it got to do with you if it's your fault? I'll meet you at the cottage. She wanted her friendship and this party back. Of course, I thought you were the one holding a grudge against me. That's why you didn't call. Selena thought her friend cried. You what? They both laughed. That same evening, everyone was at the gathering. It seemed like everything was the same as before. Only the children were now 3 instead of 2. And where did you put the third one? Her husband reminded her of a question he'd asked her before. On the couch. She looked at everyone confidently now, not like when everyone took her for a fool. It had been decided that the children would not go to school. Alex was far behind, and Selena wanted to get him up to speed in a year. Barry and Billy were happy about that too, and Albert realized that he and immediately said the right things. It was too early for the boys to sit at desks. When not 2, but 3 identical boys were brought to the kindergarten, the teacher grabbed her head. Albert and Selena stood aside and watched their children. They were so happy, even though they had been through so much together.